4 years ago, a bunch of cavers from Nottingham got the fright of their lives when they came face to face with a human skull sealed in the wall of that cave. But that was just the beginning. Dozens of other human bones were discovered from at least 20 different people, making this one of the largest collections of human bones ever found in a cave in this country. And when they were radiocarbon dated, some of them were found to be Stone Age, nearly 5,000 years old. But the story gets even more intriguing. At least 7 of the humans were newborn babies. And there were artefacts too. This bone pin and this strange worked antler. And there was a stash of Roman coins here too. How did they all fit together? What was going on here? Solving this prehistoric puzzle is going to take a lot of pretty extreme archaeology. And as usual, we've got just 3 days. Our cave's on a ridge in the Peak District in Derbyshire. Though it seems bleak and remote today, people probably lived somewhere around here in prehistory. It's a fantastic landscape, but we're interested in what's under it. Why do we reckon there are so many bones down that cave?
Well, I can think of 3 reasons we might have a collection there. One is it could be a dump of material just chucked into the hole over a period. It could be some sort of disease, you know, a pestilence or something, but you've got several periods there.
I know what your third reason's going to be. It's ritual, isn't it?
I mean, the other reason is it could be somewhere where people ritually deposit bones, you know, into the ground, into a cave.
What do we know about them so far?
Well, we got some idea of the date range because you've got late Neolithic and early Bronze Age collection at one end, and we've got Iron Age at the other end, and you've got some Roman finds. So that's quite a long period represented.
Andrew, you've already pulled an awful lot of bones out of this cave, haven't you? Are there likely to be any more there?
I think there's going to be a lot more bones in there. We only recovered material from the surface of the deposits in the cave. We haven't yet dug into the deposits, and we're hopeful that there will be much more material coming out of those sediments.
You really need a bigger sample of material, don't you? You need to get more stuff out to see that, really.
That's right, and we need to know exactly where it comes from in the cave.
Yeah.
Treat yourself to the best gift in history this holiday season. Enjoy unlimited access to award-winning podcasts and thousands of hours of original history documentaries released weekly exclusively on History Hit. There are topics for all history lovers, from Pompeii to D-Day. Sign up via the link in the description for an exclusive discount. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to explore the past like never before with History Hit.
While Mick and Phil are going to be busy on the surface, the underground digging will be dark, wet, and possibly hazardous for our cave archaeologists Katie, Alice, and Anise. Though they don't seem unduly concerned.
Does my bum look big in this?
Cavers from the Pegasus Club who found the bones are helping us to get underground and haul spoil. Do you feel constricted in there?
Yeah, I feel like a bit of a robot. So it's a bit difficult to move.
You're ready to go?
Just about, yeah. Stick my passion.
Good luck.
I'll be down a bit later.
Katie, bring me back a bone. This cave is actually a series of chambers linked by narrow shafts. Bones have been found in 2 of them. Most were in Yorick Chamber, where Katie and Alice are going. Anise is going to Flacid, where Roman coins and pottery were also recovered. Yorick Chamber is 15 metres below the surface.
Onwards and downwards in cave.
Oh, wow.
The chamber's named after this chap, a human skull embedded in the wall of the cave. He's been here a while. Stalagmites don't grow overnight.
Are you all right, Alice? Yeah, fine.
Yorick's our rocky chamber, full of boulders and stones. One whole side of it's extremely unstable, and until the Pegasus cavers have made it safe, it's off limits.
Oh, wow.
Don't touch any of this stuff on this side here because the guys are still showing us up to make sure it's absolutely safe.
Well, the reason that we're putting this shuttering in to try and stabilise this area, because under this metal plate, earlier on we discovered an infant skull.
Yeah.
But it's totally unstable to work on.
So is it still there? Or is
It's
that...
still, part of it's still there, yes. The larger part came out, but
Yeah.
the rest of it's still in situ.
That's
Can I have a
incredible
look?
that you're finding infant skulls, because they don't even survive very well in the ground, let alone in all this rubble.
Yeah.
It's
Very
almost
lucky.
as though they've been covered over with a large stone. And then all this rubbish has fallen on them after. I don't know, or whether it's just coincidence.
Yeah, it's just stunning, isn't it? Amongst all this rubble, that they haven't just been smashed to pieces.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that we're finding stuff like that.
Alice and Katie can still search elsewhere in Yorick. Almost all of the human bones found so far came from this chamber. Now we just need to find more. Some of the bones already recovered from Yorick have been radiocarbon dated, and it shows that they come from two distinct periods. The oldest is an adult skeleton from about 2500 BC, late Neolithic, with signs of a bizarre prehistoric practice.
There are some indications around the knee joints that the rest of the leg was cut off, the lower part of the leg. When we look at these bones, we see fine cut marks
Oh, crikey.
around the knee joint.
Yeah.
You can see one running across there. Someone has been cutting through the tendons and ligaments to take this body apart.
I mean, that sounds like, or the thing you could jump to a conclusion is that that's cannibalism. But it needn't be that.
It needn't be that, and in fact, this isn't where you would cut the body necessarily. You would choose the fleshy part at the top of the leg, and you would find cut marks at this end of the bone.
Bones from 10 children, 7 of them newborn, were also recovered from Yorick. And one of these was dated to about 600 BC in the Iron Age, about 2,000 years later than the other bones. What the heck are Iron Age people doing, putting all these newly born babies into a
It's
cave?
very odd, isn't it? I've never seen anything like this before. I mean, one possibility, I suppose, is that it just doesn't survive anywhere else. This is very thin, you know, very fine bone. You can imagine it might just disappear in other sort of environments other than in the cave. We're just not seeing it. Very unusual.
The possibility that they were deliberately placed there is strengthened by the fact that they appear to have been accompanied by grave goods.
This is similar to pins which have been found in Neolithic and Bronze Age burial mounds in Derbyshire. It's very difficult to typologically date bone artefacts. The techniques of bone working haven't really changed for 10,000 years.
Because they work so well.
Yeah, but you'd see that going with the skulls and the long bones down here.
I think so. It's a decorative item.
Yeah.
And what do you think this is?
This is a very curious artifact.
Yeah, it's obviously antler.
There is a theory that the function of these was that you could use them to strip the hairs off the hide of animals like cattle, because you can catch the hairs in these little grooves and rip them out.
That's what it is. Stone Age imac. There's something like 2,500 years between our oldest Neolithic bones and our newest Iron Age ones. But there's no evidence of funeral practices from the Bronze Age, the 1,500 years between the Neolithic and Iron Ages. 400 metres from the cave is a lump in the ground, which the archaeologists think could be a Bronze Age burial mound or barrow, and if it is, it would fill the gap. A barrow would usually be off limits, but we can dig this one because local rumour has it that there's been unofficial excavation into the mound. Our primary goal is to find out the extent of the damage. Phil and Mike Parker-Pearson have made a start clearing the mound, and they've already found the probable marks of the robber trench from 1983.
That's the buried turf from 83. And look, if you follow it along, you can see where this has been cut straight through these. So that's the edge of the trench right here.
The rubber trench isn't proof that the mound is a barrow, but in case it is, it gives us a way in while minimising new damage. Half an hour after arriving in the cave, Katie and Alice are finding that Yorick is littered with human bones.
Yeah, that looks like a human elbow to me.
To get them down to.
Just to be a bit more specific, it's the bottom end of the humerus on the right-hand side.
We now need to get the bones to the surface, cleaned up, and more closely examined to see if they complete our prehistoric puzzle. Just finding more bones doesn't tell us how they got here. They might have been dumped, or even moved by animals, rock falls, or water and mud flows.
So there's some neonate skull.
Neonatal being
Newborn baby. Yeah.
Clusters of bones will be more promising, especially if they're delicate and undamaged. Careful recording, by measuring off fixed points on the walls, will pinpoint whether they're in clusters. Because we're 15 metres underground, the spoil can't be hauled out of the chamber, so Katie and Alice can only move rocks around from one spot to another. It's difficult archaeology in a hazardous location. Every time one of our underground team breathes out, carbon dioxide builds up. We're monitoring the level and we'll pump it out if it rises dangerously. Phil's being troubled by noxious discharges as well. During our lunch break, a 21st century deposit has appeared in his carefully cleared Barrow trench.
What, the cows crapped in the trench then, Phil?
I'm afraid they have, mate. Good humus, good for the roses.
Archaeologists believe that in different periods in prehistory, there were very different ways of disposing of the dead.
Well, in the Neolithic, before 2500 BC, they're basically getting bodies turned into bone. And there seem to be two main ways in which you do that. You leave them out to get pecked by the birds, or you actually take a flint tool and you strip the flesh off. Now, after 2500, we get bodies being popped into the ground whole and a round barrow built over the top.
And after that, in the Iron Age?
It's very hard to say. We find cremations, we find inhumations, we find bits of bone. And they turn up in all kinds of places, in settlements, in houses, in fields. But by and large, we don't know where the vast majority of the population is being disposed of or how.
And what about the cave?
We have two very interesting groups there. We've got the man who's had his legs cut off.
Yeah.
He's very unusual. We've not had anyone with their knees sliced through. And why is he in the cave? Why is he not being put in a barrow? And he may be just one part of the population that's not getting this particular treatment.
And what about the little babies?
Again, they're very unusual. From a period when we have very few burials, there's about a dozen of them. What are they all doing in that cave?
We hope our two sites will tell us a huge amount about how the dead were treated around here in prehistory, and it's looking good. Yorick's producing plenty of bones, and in Flacid, the chamber which produced the Roman coins and pottery but very few bones, Anise is getting very excited.
Hello, Anise to Alice.
Is Alice here?
Hi, I'm calling from Flacid. I think we may have some infant remains here that you might want to look at.
Excellent, I'll get them tugged up and I'll be in.
Okay.
Flacid's full of mud, which has to be laboriously hauled out by our human conveyor belt. Up 5 metres through a narrow, slippery shaft, 20 kilos of spoil at a time has to be dragged from the coalface to the surface. It then needs to be carefully sieved for small bones or artefacts.
Go on.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, I've not been down here
Just want
before.
to be down there because that's where we're finding your bone.
Down where?
Well, your foot is more or less.
Oh, dear. Great. Alice comes in and trashes the archaeology.
The mandible's down there if you want to drop down here.
Yeah, this is a human jawbone. We haven't got any of the teeth left in it, but it actually looks, I would say, I'd like to see it cleaned up, but I would say that that was an older adult.
Older?
We've in fact lost some of the teeth there, but it would be nice to get that cleaned up.
Hey?
So both chambers are delivering more human bones. And in Yorick, we think we might now be able to get at the infant's skull lying under the metal plate in the rocky scree.
Drive these in a bit further. Yeah. But until that's stabilised, then we could look at the skull that's under this plate and the one that's being looked at now.
Come out, come out, come out, come out.
We shouldn't.
Just go back to see what's happening. Knock it off.
What's happening is that there's still nothing doing here. Up at the mound, they're flying along. Phil, you're really hitting this fast, aren't you?
Well, we didn't really have a problem in deciding where to dig, Tony, because you could actually see where on the Barrow they'd actually put a trench in before and actually could see the backfill.
Who's they? Who are these people?
Someone who dug the Barrow out nearly 20 years ago. We don't know what was found, and hopefully we'll get some idea of what he was digging through. There could be lots of skeletons, cremated bones as well. There may be disarticulated, broken up bodies underneath this. So it's like a big cemetery, but a round one. And of course it may have started very simply as a very low monument, a cairn of stones, and then with all the soil heaped up over the top. So it could be very complicated.
But then again, it may be very simple. It may not even be a barrow. Phil and Mike are going to continue onward, ever downward. Encouragingly, the spoil from Flacid is now beginning to reveal human bones, though so far, no artefacts. And now, at last, just at the end of day one in Yorick, the promising rocky scree has been stabilised so Katie and Alice can get at it. Tony to Katie.
Hello.
What have you got down there?
Well, we're just finding some skulls, and they look like they're baby skulls, don't they, Alice?
Yeah, we've got a few pieces of what look like more neonate, so newborn baby skull. It's extremely thin, and there's lots of other little bones as well, including the clavicle, which is my favourite, so I'm very pleased about that. The other thing we've got is what looks as though it may be an adult skull in the sort of rocks behind the baby. The only thing is we've had quite a few rock falls in this chamber. That one?
That one's alright, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move this now, and we should be able to see bits down there.
Can you see it now, Tony? Just where my torch is there.
Oh yeah, I've got it.
And it looks like it's almost complete. Is it a human?
It is definitely a human skull, practically fully grown. Okay, Tony, can you see the teeth there?
Oh yes, I can, very clearly.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to take it out quite soon because the rubble above it is very loose.
But can you move it without causing a small avalanche?
Now go away.
Do you think we ought to do this tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. It's going to be an early start then, isn't it? Get out of there quickly now. Join us after the break. Phil? I heard a voice. It's beginning of day 2. Believe it or not, this is flaming June on the Derbyshire Dales, and Phil's digging a prehistoric barrow. There you are, mate. I can just make out your foot
Well, it was as
twitching.
much as we could do to find this place this morning, I'll tell you. You see, we spent yesterday taking out the backfill of our earlier barrow diggers, and we've hit bedrock down there.
Yeah.
But look what we've got down here. When Mike was working in here, we got some infant bones. And then over in this hole here, We've got yet more skull fragments just poking through the corner there. So you asked me yesterday, is this a barrow? Yes, it is definitely a barrow.
Stuart, what on earth are you going to be able to do in this visibility? Come here a minute. Look at his glasses. They're completely steamed up. Are you going to be able to do anything in this visit?
Well, I'm going to attempt to. I mean, today it's dreadful. I mean, you do need to see the landscape to interpret it, but I'm going to do my best.
I've got some good news for you. I've got a special GPS hat. If you wear this, this will signal where you are all the way back to the incident room. So whatever happens today, put that on and you can't get lost.
Oh, right. Does it come with batteries? So you're going to know where I am the whole time, presumably?
Where are you?
Found out already. See you in a bit.
While Stuart disappears into the murky landscape to find out where the people who were buried here originally lived, Phil's going to continue excavating the Barrow. Down at the cave, there's a serious hold-up while emergency safety work's carried out in Yorick. Yesterday's mini-avalanche forced us to abandon the chamber just after we'd found another human skull. So Katie's now going into Flacid, the gloopy Roman chamber. At the moment, our site's still cloaked in mystery. We can't say whether the cave and the barrow were used for different kinds of burial or just at different times.
These round barrows date from the early Bronze Age. That's about 2500 BC to 1500 BC.
Yeah.
And below ground, dig a grave in the middle of what is then covered by this great mound of soil. But this is Derbyshire, where they do things differently. So you have a curb of stones.
What was the curb for?
Well, the curb defines a sacred space, a circular area into which human bodies may be brought, and then you put your bones, maybe on the surface, maybe a few little burials in different places, and then the whole thing is covered with a great mound.
Why do you put the bones on the surface?
Well, we think what they're doing is exposing the dead.
So before you put the mound on?
Before the mound goes on, yeah.
So these bones are laid out and gradually the flesh rots off them and the bones stay there and eventually covered up?
That's it. And you may even come along and pick up the big bones and it's just the little bones that are left.
And then sometime later somebody else comes along and possibly puts more graves in?
That's right. So we get insertions like so, popping some bodies in. You may even have a pot with ashes of the dead placed into the top of the mound.
Work at the barrow's steaming along, and Mike's barely had time to roll his sleeves up again before Phil finds a cremation urn.
Can I come and have a look, Phil?
Yeah, mate, if you get down in that hole
Right.
from where you are, cheers.
What have you got then?
We thought originally it might be something that they dug up in the 80s and kind of reburied.
Yeah.
But it's clearly now very much undisturbed.
Right.
And we've even got a little bit of cremated bone just here.
Oh yes, I can see that.
It
It's
looks
very
like,
thin, isn't it?
It looks like a child's skull
Oh,
fragment.
crikey again.
So it's
Another one.
another kid, yes.
Is that the sort of pottery you'd expect a Bronze Age urn to be round here?
Well, it looks Bronze Age.
Yeah.
What we're looking for is if there's any decoration on it, if we've got a rim, and whether it's of a particular type or not.
Mike, do you reckon the pot is the right way up, or is it inverted upside down?
This looks to me like this is getting towards the bottom, and it's actually
So,
widening.
so we're looking at it upside down. then.
Yeah. This is untouched since the Bronze Age. So it's been broken. They've mixed it not just with the bones, but all of this black pyre material.
Yeah.
And they've just dug a hole and chucked it in.
See, I mean, that's the other interesting thing about this cremation, because obviously when it was put in here, the mound, the barrow, was already there.
Right.
So God alone knows when it was actually constructed.
Sure. This could be somewhere between what 1500 and 1000 BC.
Yeah.
Something
Sort of
like
late-ish, mid to late
Bronze Age. Yes.
Who knows what else is in here? We're only on the surface. Phil wants to get the contents out and is also looking for something to date the urn, either a pattern carved into it or the rim. The cave seems to be getting gloopier and gloopier. You'd think we were taking mud in, not bringing it out. Within minutes of arriving in Flaccid, Katie's found buried treasure.
Oh my god, looks like a brooch or something. It's incredible. That's going to look great when it's cleaned up.
Stuart's groping his way through the foggy landscape, looking for any evidence of prehistoric settlements.
Oh, he's just moved. So Stuart's there.
He may not know where he is, but in the incident room we do, thanks to the GPS hat. If the mist doesn't lift, everyone on this dig's going to need GPS helmets.
I've just found something that you might be interested in. It's amazing. I just found it just lying on the surface of the clay.
Oh.
It's very muddy, but
Yes. Oh, goodness.
look at that. It's a brooch, isn't it?
Yes, it's Roman.
And it's so beautifully preserved. You can even see it's
absolutely.
like fresh metal there.
Yeah.
It's
It might
lovely.
have been silvered originally because they often were, but it's obviously a prize item.
And this has come out of a whole load of mud that had Roman coins and a bit of Saman pottery as well. So
right,
they're
so
getting a
possibly
pretty
second
good
century. Yeah, AD.
Right.
Yeah.
Yet another Roman find. And it's looking increasingly likely that this cave was used for burials not just in the Neolithic and Iron Ages, but in the Roman period as well. It seems extraordinary that our cave, which was probably hugely important for such a long time, was only rediscovered by the Pegasus cavers by chance.
We came into this cave, which was just a simple chamber with a flat, muddy floor, with no ways off anywhere in the chamber.
So what did you see, Malcolm?
Right, when I came into the chamber and studied the lie of the rock, noticed the watercourse was running down this fault line and goes to the weakest point. So I started digging in the floor.
So that was all covered in mud?
That's right, up to this level. Well, we got down to what we thought was cobbles, and Andy was on a lifeline, and next thing you know, I lost him. The floor went.
So you tumbled in?
That's right, come face to face with some skulls.
Skulls?
That's right. One of them was calcited actually onto the wall.
So it was like frozen into the wall?
That's right, yeah.
So what did you do?
I made a sharpish retreat.
One of the frightening things was one of the first skulls we saw. It was a cranium, but on top of the cranium there was 2-inch growth of a boss stalagmite, which was really unusual because it looked as though the skull had got a horn on the top of its head. And very close to it was a goat skull, and the position of the goat skull made that appear to have horns as well. And when we saw the fragments of infant cranium circled around this animal skull, it was really freaky.
Child sacrifice.
That was our initial thoughts. To the untrained eye, that's what it looked as though it could be.
It's a bit heavy.
Yorick Chamber has now been reopened, and Alice has been joined by Andrew Chamberlain and Katie. The bad news is that the rock slope, which is stuffed with human bones, has been declared permanently off limits.
As you can see over here, this is where the skull was coming out and all those lovely bones in a whole load of mud, but it was just getting so dangerous. I mean, we were having a lot of rockfalls. So that's all been bouldered up now, so it's much safer. We're going to leave that area totally now.
No more neonatal.
No more
skeletons
bones.
there.
No more bones. I think it's better to live than find bones.
Yes, it was feeling slightly dangerous yesterday, so...
The good news is that we can still dig in the floor of the cave, and Andrew thinks that the bones found here are most likely to be where they were originally placed.
It's over, isn't it?
I thought you said it was safe.
Well, that's what it's for.
It is, that's what it's for.
It's tested, isn't it?
Tested, yeah.
When it's full, that was like formation panic.
Yes. Quick panic.
Is anywhere in the cave safe? That rockfall was in a new place. The area where we can dig safely is now getting smaller and smaller. The The Barrow trench is now being extended, while Phil's working on lifting the cremation urn. It's slow and painstaking work. We're hoping that the rim is somewhere in there. Our site's intriguing, but there are still more questions than answers. Although after 2 days digging we've probably increased the head count from 20 to 26, none of the bones has any useful distinguishing features like disease or cut marks which would help to explain their presence in the cave. Nor have we found any artefacts that tie in with our known dates in the Iron Age or the Neolithic. The one artefact we have found, the beautiful Roman brooch, doesn't have a body definitely associated with it. It's the end of day 2. I feel enormously relieved that I'm finally down here, although quite frankly, given that this is the area where we had the avalanche yesterday evening, I have a certain amount of trepidation. Anise, what's been happening in Flaccid Cave?
Well, we found plenty of animal bones and a few human remains, but also this, which is very interesting because it's the first sign of an infant.
The first one that you've had out of that cave?
Yeah, a few fragments from the skull.
That's brilliant. Katie, you had a great day here yesterday. Was today as good?
We had a great day yesterday, but today has been actually quite miserable.
Why?
Because all the human bones, which were behind you, have been blocked up now because it was far too dangerous yesterday. And we've spent the entire day shifting rubble out of this cavern.
So, what are you going to do tomorrow?
Well, I think we're going to have to go down into chamber 3.
That's 15 feet below.
It is, and it's very scary as well.
Join us after the break. It's the beginning of day 3. Half our diggers have gone down the cave searching for bones. Here on the prehistoric Barrow, Phil's about to lift a burial urn. What exactly have you got there, Phil?
Well, I've got a magnificent burial urn here, Tony. This is the circumference of it. You can see all the pieces of pot standing on edge, coming right the way round there. So it's a pot that big across. You can see that the actual quality of the pot is very badly fired. You can see it's not in very good condition. Here we go. There we go.
Well done, mate.
Magnificent stuff though, isn't it, eh?
The cave isn't going to give up its secrets so willingly. As the safe area of Yorick gets ever smaller, Katie's been forced to hunt elsewhere for bones. She's now going to the 3rd chamber. It's another 5 metres below Yorick, and just getting there is an extreme experience.
Shouldn't have had so much breakfast.
Access is difficult, but we're hoping that the reward will be more bones and artefacts.
Does it get any wider?
A bit.
But it's not to be. The rocks are even more unstable here.
I think it's far too dangerous to be down here moving stones.
A bit claustrophobic, yeah?
It is, yeah. I think we should just get out and concentrate up in Yorick.
All right.
What was that?
It's me, don't worry.
Katie's now going back to Yorick to see if she can improve her luck there. Alice is already in Flaccid, our muddy chamber, where all the Roman finds have been made.
Yeah.
Alice?
Hello.
Hiya. Oh, it's like Walton Towers coming down here, isn't it?
Yeah, actually you have to be a worm to get into this one.
What have you got?
I'm really excited. We've got lots and lots of human bones coming out here. It's great. We've got human femur here. It's all sticking together with mud, look. There's a human femur. We'll clean it up a bit later. Adult human femur. Got some fragments of adult skull there, and that's an adult vertebra. One of the ones from the lower back, lumbar one. But we've also got, again, child remains.
Isn't this weird?
It's really strange. Can you see this bit here?
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting pretty familiar with those. That's the child's skull, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And that's just the side of your head there, where your ear is. In fact, the ear hole is somewhere there on the outside. So that is part of a child's skull again. And there's a few more fragments there, and they're very closely associated with that adult femur there. So whether they were sort of buried at the same time. The trouble is there's been so much movement in the cave that we can't really say that.
Now we've got infant bones in both chambers. But with no distinguishing features or artefacts, mystery of why human bones are in cave still unsolved. Mystery of animal bones in cave sorted.
You've got wild boar, goat, in this case covered in stalagmite, really thick stalagmite.
Oh, this isn't part of the skull?
No, this is stalagmite that's formed on the surface of the skull as it was presumably lying on the cave floor.
This bit here's the bone?
Yeah.
And there's stalagmite?
Yeah. And then slightly more exotic things like bear. A lovely arm bone of a bear, an animal that you might expect to be in a cave.
And what's this big thing here?
Oh, that's one of the most spectacular things. Absolutely beautifully preserved as well. This is an aurochs.
Whatever's that?
It's a wild cow. It's a cow about the size of a rhino. And we believe this particular bone is about 6,000 years old. So this is forming the sort of far end of the assemblage here.
How do you reckon they got in the cave?
I think they just dropped in.
What do you mean?
I think these are animals that were feeding around the edge of a shaft into the cave and they've just lost their footing and dropped in.
Isn't it more likely that people were killing them and then dragging them in the cave to eat them?
No, I don't think so, because there's no evidence on the bones of the kind of activities that we would have expected to take place. There's no evidence of bone smashing for marrow extraction, and there's certainly no butchery marks on the bones. These are complete bones in many cases.
Could they have been for sacrifice?
I don't think so. It doesn't work. We've got a far too big a range of animals here.
So people weren't killing and cooking them?
No.
And they weren't killing them for ritual reasons?
No, this is the kind of thing that's probably still going on now.
Well, that's two theories you've knocked on the head. Thank you very much. There's a surprise inside Phil's cremation urn.
Oh, crikey, that's moved on a lot, hasn't it? We're really pleased now. We've actually got down to the reason this pot was put in the ground. We've actually got the main deposit of cremated bone.
Oh, yeah, I can see.
And look, we have got vast chunks of, well, partially cremated bone.
But it's very thin, isn't it?
It's a child.
So it's a child again.
Yeah.
It's not a newborn child, presumably.
No, it's several years old.
Yeah, but I mean, we could have several bodies in here, couldn't we?
Yeah, it's big enough.
Yeah.
It's a big pot.
And have we got any of the rim of this pot yet?
No, I mean, that is the big problem.
Broadly, we're looking at a pot that's somewhere between about 2000 and 1500 BC.
Right.
But the rim will really help us to narrow it down better. But it's just extraordinary. All those sherds, not one piece.
That's the frustrating thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's making me wonder whether they've collected together bits of broken vessels and put them in here, rather than the complete one that's collapsed on it.
Because that is going to be the most diagnostic piece of the pot.
That's really what we need to see.
At the moment, there's confusion about which way up the pot is. If it's upside down, the rim may still be down there. But we're nearly halfway through day 3 and there's lots more work to do. Down in Yorick, Kate is like a dog that's lost its bone. She's digging like a maniac wherever she can. Unfortunately, there are no bones and no artefacts. As for the sieving, there must be an easier way to collect rocks. The Barrow Trench has reached rock bottom, literally.
So this is the limestone bedrock before the Barrow is built,
That's
in
right.
fact, yeah. What we call a natural.
Yeah, and on top of that is this, which is a buried soil.
Right.
So this would have been turf and a certain amount of soil, really quite thin.
So this would have had soil and grass over the top
Yeah,
originally.
but not very deep by the looks of it at all.
Right.
Maybe with 1 or 2 stones poking up.
So they then come along and build the Barrow.
They
and
come along and build the Barrow.
What's the sequence with that?
And then we have a clay mound.
Right.
And against that, we have a series of turfs, and you can see they're different colours of orange and brown, and they've been stacked up to form a curb or a perimeter to the edge of the Barrow. And then they finally cover it with this stuff, which is a very nice soft brown loam.
Right.
And that comes right up over the top. And it's into this that fills cremation has been dug. And that's the final act.
Right, so it's a 3-stage construction to it. Small mound to start with, turf's added,
yes,
and then the whole thing covered over and cremation's put in the top.
In a nutshell.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, very nice.
Despite having had to stumble around in the mist, Stuart thinks he's worked out where the people who used the cave lived. He's now in the valley below our cave.
So I think we're actually sitting on the slopes here of a late prehistoric Iron Age community with 2 or 3 groups of round houses down here with paddocks and yards with animals in, fields with crops growing down on the soils.
Presumably
here.
below the steep slopes all the way around.
Exactly, it's our entire world in this valley, but in terms of the cave, if you look over the hill there, so that's where the cave is.
Yeah.
Well, look at the profile. If you follow it along, it starts to drop down, get that depression there. Then it rises up ever so slowly towards where the cave is, where the 2 aerials and tents are there. So what you've actually got from here is a profile where you can actually see the cave on the highest point of that ridge.
Yeah.
But the other really interesting aspect about this valley is, of course, that you can't see the other Barrow.
No.
It'd be over where that ruined cottage is over there. The Barrow would have been on the ridge behind that ridge over there.
Yeah.
You can't see it from this settlement at all.
No.
The cave will serve the community in this valley, and I'll bet you £1 to a penny when we look over the hill the other side, the Barrow serves the community in the next valley.
Yeah.
And sure enough, 4,000 years ago, this would have been the view from the neighbouring valley, with the Barrow beautifully skylined. Meanwhile, the osteologists have been hard at work and noticed that a number of the skulls from Yorick Chamber have a peculiar characteristic in common.
What do you reckon to that?
Is it human?
It is.
Is that an eye socket?
It certainly is.
Then why has it got this strange jutting?
That's the interesting bit. That's its nose.
That's bizarre.
It's huge, isn't it?
Absolutely massive.
Those are the nasal bones, which are the bones right at the top of your nose that you break if somebody punches you in the face. And that is just... it's a huge nose. They're really, really jutting out.
So what do they look like when they haven't got big noses?
This skull is probably the most sort of normal, as it were, if you can say a nose is normal. Can you see that that's a much more gentle curve there? So if you sort of compare those together, you can see that the nose of this individual is going to be much less prominent than that one there.
You say they're big.
Yeah.
What would they actually have looked like?
Pretty massive, and we've been actually working on a reconstruction, and we've been using cutting-edge technology to produce something real sort of state-of-the-art. And I've got it here. It would have looked something like that.
Something like...
No!
Andy, is there any significance about the fact that so many of them have got big noses?
Well, it probably suggests that quite a few of these people are related to each other.
You're kidding?
Yeah.
So we've got a family of big-nosed people. And in fact, there are other things as well. We've had things like double-rooted canines in some of the mandibles, and that suggests... yeah, kinship, a closeness, a familial relationship.
Well, that's a twist to the story, isn't it? We've got a whole lot of big-nosed relatives being buried in that cave.
Yeah.
Up at the Barrow, it's been a race against time to see if we could reveal the rim of the cremation urn, which might allow us to date it. After 2 days of painstaking scraping, Phil thinks he's finally found it.
Okay, so this is the body of the pot coming down here to the shoulder.
Yep.
And then it comes on down to the neck there.
The neck is the concave piece.
What, this whole bit in here?
Yeah,
So that's the neck there then?
yeah. And it may be the concave neck, steeply concave neck of a coloured urn.
Well,
There's
actually,
all the rim.
I mean, I think if I... yeah, I can actually get my
you can, can't you?
toothpick underneath
so there's
there.
There's
That
no
is-
colour.
That is the end of the pot.
Yeah. It probably is biconical rather than coloured. There isn't enough depth there for a colour.
This biconical urn turns out to be quite a find. Only one other example has ever been found in the Peak District. This one would have been made specially for the cremation around 1000 BC, towards the end of the Bronze Age, by which time the Barrow may have been 1,000 years old.
We'll take that box there, then I think we'll just call it a day.
Okay.
Yorick Chamber remains a mystery. Everyone's convinced that the unstable rocks in here are hiding more human bones, but they've guarded their secrets jealously, in spite of our heroic attempts to get at them. Are you surprised that there's so many skeletons of young children in that cave?
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised. But I'm not surprised that the skeletons have actually survived, because it is, after all, a bone cave.
What do you mean a bone cave?
Well, it's the kind of place where bone survives for many thousands of years, and the people living in this area would have observed those bones, and it would be a natural place to put other bones.
It's a heck of a way to go. How did they get to where they got to?
I think they must have been carried in by other people. There are no chewing marks on these infants' bones. They're not being dragged in by wild animals. And so to get that far down into the cave, they had to be carried in, either as bodies placed on the floor of the cave to decay, or perhaps they'd already become skeletons somewhere else and were brought in as bundles of bones.
So this could just be a cave where, when little children died, they were brought to and laid out?
It looks like everybody was laid out down there. It's just that there were a lot of children.
So we can go some way towards explaining the Iron Age babies in Yorick. The question now is, what was going on in Flacid? Now that our best find, the beautiful brooch, has been added to the other Roman finds from the chamber, Kai thinks she's got the answer.
This is a beautiful find. Cool. This is what they call a trumpet-headed brooch. It's either made of silver or it's been silvered or tinned on the surface, which is why it's quite shiny.
Right.
And it would have been worn as one of a pair, worn like this, with a silver chain between them. This is a high-status find and the sort of thing that's often found with female Roman burials.
Right.
This dates to the middle, probably, of the 2nd century. So it's a bit later than the coins. The coins date from between the early 70s AD right through to about AD 117. And to me, this certainly looks like it could be associated with these. We could have a set of, in effect, grave goods. We've got a mortarium here for preparing food.
Yeah.
We've got part of a Samian ware drinking vessel, a wine cup if you like. We've got some coins which may be heirlooms by the time this was deposited.
Right.
These could be helping a lady on her way to the afterlife.
Right, right.
After 3 days, we can say conclusively that our cave was used for the ritual deposition of humans. Most recently, there was a Roman burial, perhaps as late as the 2nd century. About 700 years before that, in the Iron Age, children were buried here, though we still don't know why. In the 1500 years before that, in the Bronze Age, the locals buried their dead in the Barrow, either after cremation or excarnation, where they were laid out to rot. More than 4,500 years ago, around the end of the Neolithic period, the cave was used to bury the bones of a man whose legs had been cut off, disarticulated. More broadly, we can say that this ridge in Derbyshire was used for burials for nearly 3,000 years, using different bits, in different ways, at different times. It's hard to believe, but these buildings were once at the very centre of a kingdom that dominated the whole of Western Scotland for over 500 years. These people are from the National Museums of Scotland, and they've got one final chance to unlock the secret of that kingdom, the Lords of the Isles. What can the Time Team do to help? Over there somewhere is Donegal, on the coast of Ireland, and if you climb to the top of that little hill on a clear day, I reckon you can probably see it. Although not today, it looks nice now, but it's been tipping down, I'm absolutely drenched. Anyway, about 1,000 years or so ago, settlers arrived from Ireland, here on the Isle of Islay, and it was their descendants who became known as the Lords of the Isles. And for the past 5 years, archaeologists from the National Museums of Scotland have been digging on that little island in the middle of the loch. You can see why they've concentrated on the island, can't you? There's the remains of old habitations on it, it's close to the shore, it's very dramatic looking, but what they haven't had the time or the resources to do is look any further afield. And that's what the Time team is going to do over the next 2 or 3 days. We're going to dig around the little lumps and bumps around the loch, because the National Museums have only got the resources to dig for this summer. After that, no more money. So if they don't find anything this summer, they never will. I'm going to find out exactly what Time team are going to do. I'm going to dry off first. Mick?
Yeah. Hi, Tony.
What's the plan?
Well, we've got all sorts of work started all over the place.
Already?
We've got the geophysics going up on the mound there, and you can see the surveyors up there as well. And then we're going to be looking at the lakeside round here with the divers. They're going to be looking in the silt over here. We're also going to be over there where we think we've got these guardhouses, where Phil and the others are on the other side, on the side of the loch.
And you haven't actually had a look at the mound that we're going to look at?
No, we haven't. Our remit has been to look at the 2 islands here, and we're coming to the end of that phase.
I don't quite understand, because the mound seems to me, as a layman, just such an obvious feature. Why haven't you looked at it before?
Well, because our remit really has been to stick to the 2 islands, but it's only really by being here that the importance of the mound has dawned on us. And that's, again, one of the reasons why it's useful to get in other people who can help you see things that perhaps you fail to notice because you're so much into the job in hand that you can't take a wider look.
David's keen for us to investigate the mound because he believes it could have been used as a ceremonial site by the Lords of the Isles, possibly the place where they inaugurated their leaders. Our plan of action is to carry on at the Guardhouse site until we've got some geophysics information about the mound. What we're hoping is that the geophysics survey will tell us if there are any signs of buried stones or structures under the ground. The National Museums of Scotland are currently working on 2 trenches on the main island. This one, which is trying to find more evidence of medieval buildings or signs of earlier occupation, and this trench, which is positioned at the water's edge in an attempt to learn how the causeway linked with the island. Have you found something?
Yeah, we just found a little glass bead down there. Well, not a bead, small. Might have been the makings of a bead.
Just while you were bailing?
Yeah, if we'd been troweling, we might have missed it because it could have gotten coated with mud and stuff.
Where is it? Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? We've only been here about 5 minutes. Obviously, 4 years of excavations here at Finlaggan have produced hundreds of finds. Brooches like this one, and harp pins like this. Pieces of pottery, all helping to provide a picture of how the Lords of the Isles enjoyed life here in the 13th century. This is Victor's reconstruction of how this bit of pot would have looked when complete. It's a Santon jug, which David believes would have been brought in with the claret from France. But all of these finds have come from the main island and the smaller Council Island. But what can we find from the mainland? Phil is working at the guardhouses, the geophysics are working at the mound at the far end of the site, and the divers are working in the silt at the edge of the causeway which would have linked the island to the mainland. But at the moment, they don't seem to be having much luck.
Well, the bad news is visibility is dreadful. There's a lot of silt coming down the stream and the peat's making it very dark as well, so it's if we work here we're going to have to be very, very tight in.
The trouble for me, poor ignorant southerner, is that the Lords of the Isles is one of those Scottish phrases like speed bonny boat or you take the high road that sounds incredibly evocative, and I've absolutely no idea what it means.
Well, it all started in 1156 with this chap called Somerled,
who was a petty king in Argyllshire. And he cast lustful eyes on Islay off the coast of Scotland, won a famous sea battle and drove the Norse out of Islay. And he made his headquarters here, had descendants who settled and established a mini kind of palace at Finlaggan. They didn't start calling themselves Lords of the Isles until the 14th century, and even then they assumed the title out of the blue.
So were there lots of Lords of the Isles at one time, or was there just one lord who ruled over all of the islands?
Well, from the 12th century onwards, basically one lord. In fact, after Somerled, died in battle against one of the kings of Scotland in 1164, the whole thing was split up amongst his sons. But one of his grandsons was called Donald, and from him, all the MacDonalds conceivably in the world, including the fast food bloke, are descended from that one grandson of Somerled.
Meanwhile, as the rain continues to fall, water levels continue to rise, making the archaeological going tough. However, Phil's pressing on at the far side of the loch. We're digging here because there are 17th century documents which tell us there were guardhouses here, housing up to several hundred men, protecting the ferry crossing onto the island. It's easy to forget, especially in bad weather like this, that these islands were a special place for the Lords of the Isles, so important, in fact, that some of them chose to be buried here.
Wowee, look at that. That's brilliant, isn't it?
Quite an impressive collection, isn't it?
Yeah.
These were found late last century in the ruins of the chapel up there.
And this is brilliant, isn't it? The one in the middle of the...
Yeah.
Do you think the Lords of the Isles would actually have looked like this?
Oh, undoubtedly. A lot of the top people in West Highland society wore armour like this because it's very light. They were able to stride across hills through the bogs and heather. They weren't encumbered with plate metal. And you see the garment, the main garment is wearing an accaton, a quilted garment, probably made of linen or cotton, and stuffed with other material like wool or grass.
I can see, David, how that sort of padded clothing would be very effective against a sort of side swipe with a sword. It would sort of perhaps absorb the impact.
Yes.
But I can't see how it would actually stop anything going through it. Sally Ann is here because you're going to make us a replica of one of these.
Yeah.
It might be something that will become clear if we do that, so we actually see what it looks like.
Well, I think you'll find also, if we make it up out of linen, that linen does actually stop a sharp blow better than you'd think it would, particularly if it's stuffed with tow, which is the untreated, unworked linen fibres. It's surprisingly good. Now, this gentleman may have been wearing mail underneath this as well.
Ah, right, yeah.
Which would also have stopped the blow.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And have you got a volunteer who we can...
I have got a volunteer somewhere, yes.
Who is it?
Rat.
Rat?
Chest measurements?
So, we have just 2.5 days to try and produce an accaton for rat. All I can say is, I hope it's waterproof. A Scottish name, rat?
It dates back to the sort of the mists of time when I was young and punk was alive, I'm afraid.
In addition to the geophysics survey of the mound, Carenza and Stewart are preparing an earthworks plan, recording any lumps and bumps in the ground, which may represent the outlines of old buildings and give us a clue to how the mound's been used in the past. Mick has decided it's time to check up on how Phil's getting on at the Guardhouse. With him is Donald McFadden, local farmer and a member of the Finlaggan Trust, who were responsible for bringing archaeologists to Finlaggan Loch in the first place.
What we would like is a reconstruction of what the island had looked like in, the 13th, 15th century when those people were there.
In fact, we're already well on the way to granting Donald's request. Victor's started work on a reconstruction based on the information provided by the excavations here over the last 4 years. We know there would have been a prestigious building on the council island here, and a posh guest hall and a chapel at this end of the main island. And access for important people would have been by ferry, which was protected by the guardhouses on the far side of the loch.
How are you getting on then, Phil?
Well, apart from this being the wet side of the lake, not too bad.
This is Donald McFadden from the Finlaggan Trust.
Very pleased to meet you. Now you're getting on here. Donald's very interested in the excavations that we're doing. Well, not too bad. I mean, you might be surprised to know that when we arrived here this morning, this was like a swimming pool. Well, actually, all this through here was full of water. I mean, that must have chucked it down last night. So the first thing we had to do was to bail the site out. But
what are you getting?
Well, you can see we've got quite a nice preserved building here.
There's obviously more walls under here.
That's right,
isn't there?
We got a nice turf bank there, nice turf wall there.
Yeah.
And then through the middle we got the central part of the building, and on the other side of the building,
they're using turf cut into blocks like building blocks, and then putting a timber roof on the top of it. You know, timber and thatch on the top.
And
that's a traditional building.
It is.
Well,
True, yes. And it's possible it could be a guardhouse being so near the water's edge.
Well, we got nothing to prove it at the minute. You know, we just don't know until we can get some datable finds, and it doesn't look like we're going to get them at the minute.
You've got nothing out of it at all. No?
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
Well, you can see what the state of play is, Mick. I mean, it's getting pretty impossible, and I mean, looking at it, I mean, it looks set, doesn't it?
It's not going to get any better, is it, for the next...
It doesn't look like it, does it? No.
I reckon we should break for lunch.
Oh, I reckon that's the best thing you've said today.
I think you can have my permission to do that.
Is anyone else feeling as dispirited as I am? Just damp all over. Any good news?
Well, actually, yes. We've done some work up on top of that mound that you can occasionally see through the rain. Both the Earthwork Survey and Geophysics, I think, do suggest there are some possible buildings. There's something up there that would be worth having a look at. The Earthwork Survey actually does show some sort of lines that might be the remains of walls, suggest there might have been a building there. This is the top of the mound here. And what's showing up as slight bumps in the ground is this feature here. And you can see this, there's a very regular turn to it here. That looks like it might be the remains of a wall of a building or something like that. It's a bit difficult to tell exactly what it is because there's rocks sticking up through the grass, which is natural. This is obviously interfering to some extent. We're at the moment trying to think where to put a trench, but John, what does it look like?
Yes, I mean, the geology is difficult. We are getting correlation with the topographic survey, and this is the area where it correlates well with the earthworks. We've got a strong...
So that
is
this suggests a wall.
Is the same as that.
Correlates there.
So how do we make a decision precisely where to put our trench?
Well, we've got this accurately plotted out, and given that the earthworks and the geophysics correlate on this anomaly, I mean, I'd have thought that was a good target to go for.
I think so.
Yeah.
To
do,
David.
I must admit, I'm tremendously relieved about that, actually.
So are we.
And yes, a trench through that would be very interesting. And I certainly agree with you wholeheartedly that it doesn't sound as if it's something that's 19th or 20th century.
So we're going to dig where they correlate on the anomaly?
Yeah. That's right.
He's
Good correlation.
So, Trench 2 gets started on top of the mound, with everyone lending a hand. For the moment, we're going to stop work at the Guardhouse site. But the fact that we didn't come across any finds at all, not even the usual bits of 18th century clay pipe, suggests that it is an ancient site and could well be one of the guardhouses mentioned in the documents. Work on the Ackerton is now well underway, and every effort is being made to make it as authentic as possible. This, for instance, is incredibly smelly sheep's wool, which has been collected from the surrounding fields. And already our excavations on top of the mound are beginning to produce finds.
Wow. That's a bit more like it, isn't it, eh? Yeah, I mean that's...
Happy with that as prehistoric?
Oh, absolutely, no question about that.
Well,
Well, is this the only piece, or you got some more?
Well, actually, no, but there's a couple more here.
Well, it's all flint then.
Quick so.
I think we'd have had a wild whoop of joy if we turned up any pottery, wouldn't we?
No, I'm quite happy to have a prehistoric site up here. Oh, wow. Look at that then.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we don't want any pottery with this stuff.
It's all that same white flint, isn't it? It's a
Yeah.
nice little assemblage, actually. Still, I'd rather have something a bit later.
Of course, Ruth, look at that lot.
Fabulous stuff.
Wow. Where's this from then?
Well, you know, we started over there on the causeway in the reeds, and
Yeah.
the visibility was too bad, so we moved down to the council aisle looking for the causeway there.
Yeah.
And I think we found the edge of the causeway, and also at the edge of it the remains of what looks to be a midden, which is where all this stuff's coming from. There's still a lot down there. There's wooden artifacts still lying in the bottom waiting,
but that's for tomorrow. But some of this stuff's really nice.
Yeah,
That's
that's bone.
mainly bone, isn't it?
Bone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Look at the size of these things. And there's butchery marks on them too, we're sure.
Right. So these are food remains of animals they've chopped up, and yeah, this looks like chop marks, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
sure
it's
that's
all
chopped.
broken through.
Yeah. I think some of
fantastic,
it.
isn't it?
It's actually something that we've sadly missed on the excavation so far, is that we haven't actually had any medieval middens
Really?
on the
Yeah.
island itself. So this is really exciting for us.
Excellent.
Yeah.
This is going to give you the diet once we can get some sort of date, isn't it? I mean, it's fantastic.
And there's so much of it there. This is all from an area about half the size of this pallet, very small.
Yeah.
And there's loads more.
Yeah, that's great. It's all coming down to tomorrow, isn't it?
Yep.
Great. Smashing. Thanks very much.
You know, you just never get...
Morning.
Morning.
It's not so romantic up here now, is it?
Yeah, well, we're getting some good stuff. Got that bit of flint, Phil?
Yeah, we have.
You know, we had some flints yesterday
Yeah.
up here, and David was pretty cautious because they get flint all the time. Well then,
Don't
Phil.
let it blow away, Tony.
What is it?
Well, it's what we call a microlith. I mean, it's a very small piece of flint, but it's been deliberately shaped. And the important thing is that it is a very diagnostic piece of flint.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that they can be tied down to hunters who were probably the first people who were living in Scotland, maybe, 8,000 years ago.
Well, how do you know that this is man-made? Because it looks to me just like something I'd dig up out the garden.
Well, can you see that along this edge here, some very, very minute, microscopic almost chips along the edge?
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Been removed from there, and in fact we got the same thing on this side as well. Little tiny chips along that edge. Now that is not the sort of thing that would happen accidentally.
What would they use that for then, Phil?
Well, these things are used basically collectively. We use quite a lot of them in a tool. We call them composite tools.
Yeah.
And they've always been accepted as being arrowhead tips and things like that, barbs. But now, I mean, people are increasingly becoming aware that they're used for drills, engraving tools, scraping tools. I mean, you name it, you virtually use them for anything.
So what sort of people were these?
Well, they're basically hunters. And let's be honest, what a better place to observe your game than up here? I mean, you've got a full view of everything. Like, you can have a look out at the lake and animals coming down and what have you. Superb catchment area.
So are we really starting to say that this is a prehistoric site, or is it too early yet?
I personally think we're probably a bit early. That
One flint doesn't make a summer, you know.
But at the same time, flints that are up here, they haven't migrated here. The flint is likely to have started up here. It hasn't moved down. We're right up on top of a hill. No, I think we could have a Mesolithic site up here.
Right, so beginning of day 2. Last night I thought we were going to discover the remains of Celtic lords and ladies, and we've ended up finding some new Stone Age people.
Middle Stone Age.
Middle Stone Age people, sorry. Can we get out of the wind and have a council of war?
Yeah.
So the decision's taken to extend our trenches on top of the mound in the hope that we can now answer 2 questions. Is this a Mesolithic site, and was it used by the Lords of the Isles thousands of years later? To speed up our survey of the rest of the site, we've brought in a satellite mapping system that'll quickly enable us to produce a large-scale map of the area. The Global Positioning System, as it's called, has already mapped the mound, which you can see here, and this may enable us to work out whether water levels have changed and if the mound was ever an island. Hiya.
Come see our new toy.
Yes. Yes.
Hi, Tony.
How does it work?
We've got a series of satellites up in space that are telling us where they are, and we're measuring our distance from those satellites. And from that information, we can get our coordinates of the ground point here with respect to those satellites and with respect to another station. So what we're looking at is getting coordinates to an accuracy of 10 or so millimetres in plan around the countryside, and within 10-15 millimetres in height wherever I walk with the pole.
So these satellites are sending down information about where they are in space?
Yeah, exactly that.
And if you've got the information from 4 or 5 of them, then you know where the bottom of the pole is?
Exactly, yeah.
So like a sort of electronic tape measure?
Yeah, so now wherever I go, I'm just measuring coordinates of the ground.
The GPS system uses American military satellites, which shows that Star Wars wasn't a total waste of time. Currently, all's working well, and it's beginning to produce a picture of the complete landscape of Finlaggan. All the finds are dealt with in here. Finds such as this medieval belt buckle, which was found in one of the National Museum's trenches yesterday. But of course our newest source of finds this weekend is in the midden discovered by the divers between the two islands. Now my understanding of the plan for today was that Mick was going to help with the underwater archaeology, but apparently there's been a change of plan.
I think we're probably deep enough now. If we get there, we can crawl and scramble forward.
Just onto our knees?
Yep. Just follow me down.
Despite the fact that the peat gives the water a browny appearance, the visibility is actually very good. Underwater archaeology like this involves using a suction pipe, which is called a lift, and is effectively a large vacuum cleaner which sucks up the unwanted silt and helps to keep the water clear.
How you getting on then, Tony?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's so much easier than digging on the surface. There's finds all over the place.
Yeah?
Little bits of wood, little bits of bone. I've got a stonking big bit of bone about that big. I don't know what it is. We can have a look later on.
Can you see the stratification that we were on about?
Yeah, there's certainly 3 strata.
Yeah.
There's the silt, first of all, which is very grey, and you have to be very careful when you tread it, otherwise you just mess up the visibility all around you.
Yeah.
And then below that, there's like rusty pebbles. And then below that, there's the actual midden, the spoil heap, that we've been working. I can't believe I'm getting excited about a medieval rubbish tip. But there's not just the midden down here. You can see the big stones that were once part of the causeway which linked the council island with the main island. The material coming from the midden and the evidence being found in the trenches on the island all add to our understanding of how life was lived here in the medieval period. Among the finds from the island have been several harp pins, and Mary McIntyre, a member of the Finlaggan Trust, is pretty keen to hear the kind of typical instrument that would have been played in front of the Lords of the Isles 600 years ago. It's amazing how a bit of sunshine can transform everything. The whole valley looks glorious now. But what was it about these islands that made them such an attractive place to live? Apart from the exciting weather, of course. What are we looking for?
Well, at the moment we're heading out down the Sound, which is the obvious way in because it's a long sheltered inlet. And anybody coming from Ireland or from the southwest or down towards the Isle of Man or anywhere like that would have come up that way and used this long inlet to come in. You can see it in front of us now, look. This sort of jetty coming out, it's really natural boulders coming out in a line, look, under the sea. You can see down there, look. And this is where they beached the galleys. And so we can see this long sheltered beach going up very clearly in the water. And running from that beaching place, coming right through, is this road that they would have used to get to the meetings at Finlaggan itself. So we need to keep a wary eye out as we go along, see if we can't pick up traces of that.
You can see the logic of it so clearly, can't you? There's this really quite welcoming bay out there, and then this very fertile land up the middle with hills and mountains on either side.
And let's not forget, it's a well-used landscape. It's got prehistoric stuff in it, it's got Norse stuff in it, and so if this place was already revered as an important centre, then you legitimise your own activities by establishing yourself there as well. Yes, it's underneath us now, look. Yeah, see, that must be it, running away through there, look. And then going over the shoulder of the hill down there. And it's heading down for the guardhouses that we began to look at to get the ferry across. So they're coming across this slope. And their first view would have been of this island, you know, in the end of the lake.
This is a piece that Tony excavated.
Yeah. Is there anything else in with the bone, though, Nick?
Yeah, they're very small pieces. There's not so much big pottery in this, but these two pieces have decoration on them. Don't they come from the same pot?
Now, these strike me as being very interesting, actually. I've seen pottery rather similar to this coming from Ayrshire, more particularly from Dundonald Castle, which belonged to King Robert II. It's where he actually died in 1390. And these, I think, belong to quite fine jugs. They've obviously been covered with a green glaze and decorated with wavy line patterns, which I think was put on with a comb. And it's rather interesting to think that, if I'm right, that same pottery is getting to Dundonald Castle in the late 14th century and also here as well.
It's kind of nice to add to the idea of the council aisle with quite important people coming and meeting here and maybe drinking wine. And
indeed, yeah.
The change in the weather certainly cheered everyone up, and for the first time this weekend I can actually see the Paps of Jura that I've heard so much about. Our Ackerton's really beginning to take shape, and with the help of local volunteers, they tell me it'll be finished early tomorrow.
Need to adjust that for the arm seam at all, or is that okay?
No, I think that's fine. No, that should be all right. Not too solid around the waist.
The waistline, okay.
So that it can be bolted in, because that's the
Well, it
hip.
seems- yeah, it's
that's
quite-
the hip that he'll be carrying his sword on.
Yeah.
But the big question for today is, are we making any sort of progress on top of the mound? Are we finding anything that would justify our spending so much time there? Phil and Carenza believe they've got some news for us.
Yeah, they're all here. They all want to see it. What do you reckon of this then?
What do you think of that, Mick?
Good Lord. Well, there wasn't much on up here, so we thought we'd strip a bit more turf.
Well, it's either a little stone row or a souterrain, isn't it? Something like that.
Well, that's what we were speculating.
Yeah.
It might be an enclosed area of ritual significance.
Yeah.
It's a bit like a cove type structure, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's a souterrain?
Well, a sort of stone-lined underground chamber for what? What do they use for?
Not normally for storage. They mostly occur in the east of Scotland.
So does it go around this corner here?
That's what we're wondering. I mean, it does seem to curve.
Can I walk on it, all right?
Yeah. Oh, not a trial surface, thank you, Tony.
Do I have a choice?
Yeah, Phil.
I'm not following him.
That might well be natural, that bit, Tony. We're not sure about that. But it's these big boulders here, clearly artificial, it's clearly man-made structure. Can you remember, Tony, we just had these two boulders here that we thought might have been a wall. This was the first trench we opened. This is what Phil and I were thinking. It seemed to be the only sort of structure, or possible structure we'd had up here. And so we thought, well, you know, bother it, we'll follow this. This is something interesting up here. We were following gut instinct, plus the geophysics and the
I was going to say, is this what we saw on the geophysics and the earthworks? Then this sort of line. That's brilliant, then, isn't it?
So how important is this?
Oh, very. I mean, this is fantastic. Whatever date it turns out to be, it's going to be something really significant.
It's a major monument that we didn't know about before. It's completely undiscovered. It's unexpected. It's fantastic.
So we came here looking for Lords of the Isles, and last night we had Middle Stone Age.
We certainly had it this morning.
And now we've got this burial chamber from when?
Well, any date, prehistory, who knows?
From any date, who knows?
Christian,
we got a lot of work up here yet, Tony.
It's 8:15. Let's go and have a drink, shall we?
Oh God, yes, please.
I don't mean to seem over-eager.
Yes, no, I mean, I'm very pleased with that.
Would you like another glass of whiskey or two enough?
Hey.
Just thought I'd do a bit of scraping.
Caught in the act. My sight, that is. Get out of this trench.
See you after the break.
Treasure hunter.
Beginning of day 3, and there's a howling gale coming from totally the opposite direction from the howling gale yesterday. Phil, I don't understand for the life of me why people would have built up here. Every bit of weather just batters us. Why didn't they build in the lee of this hill?
Well, you got to remember, Tony, that in the Stone Age, really in the early times, this area would have probably looked totally different to what it is now. Very, very dense woodland. So there'd be loads and loads of shelter.
And when you say the Stone Age, you're talking about Mesolithic and Old Stone Age. What were they?
Well, basically you've got 3 periods of the Stone Age. You've got the very oldest Stone Age, we call it the Paleolithic, and that goes right back to the first people who were living in this country, about 500,000 years ago now. And they were living here until basically the last ice age went away, and that we were talking there maybe 12,000 years ago, 10,000 BC. And the next group of people, we call them the Mesolithic peoples, the Middle Stone Age. They're still hunters, and they're moving around, catching animals, gathering fruits and what have you. And then at maybe about 4,000 BC, you start getting the first farmers. And they're the people who are responsible for clearing a lot of the woodland.
And you think that this is New Stone Age?
If it's any of them, this is what it ought to be, yeah.
So you reckon it could have been a big stone corridor with made the earth over
Very
it?
likely, yeah. I mean, you just can't tell. In a lot of cases, a lot of this could be eroded away, the dirt, the mound.
So what are you going to do?
Well, what we should do, Tony, is take a section, we call it a section, which is just a trench running through the middle, across it. And that'll give us some idea of how deep the layers are. And we'll be able to see what this upright stone is doing, how well it's bedded into the ground. And it will also show us what these ones that are lying on their side are. And we'll probably take it about 1 metre across, something like that.
And how deep?
Until we get to the bottom.
Now that we've got a prehistoric site on top of the mound, Karenza's gone to have a closer look at a standing stone which is positioned here, and it seems to be aligned with the mound and the Paps of Jura.
If you stand on the mound, look at the stone, you see right on to the Paps of Jura there.
I must admit that when we were stood on the mound last night, I did notice how the stone was directly in the cleavage of the Paps of Jura, in fact. But I've been going through the documentary sources, and I come across the accounts of the travels of a chap called, deliciously, Martin Martin, in about 1695. And he records that at that time, at any rate, there were 2 standing stones 6 feet high on the east side of Loch Finlagan. Now, the only snag with that is, of course, that this is at the north end as opposed to the east side.
I'm not really worried about that, I must say, Robin. I think that it's quite difficult to get your bearings hereabouts, and I would guess that this is likely to be one of the stones that Martin was referring to.
Except I would refer to this as the end of the loch rather than the side of the loch.
Well, I'm not too worried. I think that...
Well, I must admit that walking over here just now, there's some interesting sort of patterns in the grass. There's one area where the grass hasn't grown, which there could be a stone under there stopping it growing. And there's actually quite an interesting sort of circle of paler grass that could even be a feature running around it. I mean, I wonder if we could get if David's interested in this, thinks there might be another one here, we get the geophysics in to have a look.
So the buried stones influence the type of the way in which the vegetation's grown over it?
Well, yes, because if there's a stone under the grass,
Yes.
there's less moisture and the grass doesn't grow as well. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a problem here. Was it dry earlier in the year, David?
It was very dry in May. Yes, I would like John to do this. I think it'd be well worthwhile encouraging him.
Our Ackerton's now finished, and Rat not only looks warm and dry, but makes a pretty convincing Lord of the Isles. That is brilliant. It looks much more practical than I thought it would be. I thought he'd just look like Rat dressing up as a pretend soldier. See if you can draw your sword.
Stand back. You've got the chainmail suit under there, so that even if anything penetrates
That's
the Ackerton,
right.
you've got
the sort of swords that we're talking about here are not designed to thrust. They're designed to slash and break.
Well, I raised the question when we discussed this earlier as to whether sort of clouting him across like that, whether you'd get through. But clearly, that's really quite padded, isn't it?
It is indeed,
Like
yeah.
that.
I think what
don't
is
want to bang you
important.
too hard,
I think what is important though is this is a brand new one,
Yeah.
and probably after his first escapade out
in the hills, and his first combat, this would be quite badly damaged.
Yeah.
But he would take it back home, hand it over to somebody, and the next time it went out, it would have lots of repairs and patches, and it would just be serviceable.
What about these fittings at the back? I mean, it's I mean, obviously you've got to get into it somehow, and you can presumably undo all this.
Yeah.
And...
Well, if I show you very briefly this, he couldn't do this himself, so he was basically at the mercy of somebody else.
Yeah.
But it's double thickness on the back where it wraps over, and he's strapped into this very, very tight. Now, I mean, when we put Rat in here, he was quite upset that we're pulling him so tight. Quite simply, if you held the body tight and compressed it, if it was hit, the internal organs don't move around.
Ah, right.
So the chance of serious bruising and internal bleeding was restricted for the fighting period. So he had a reasonable chance of getting off the battlefield in some state of survival.
And do we know that he would have had two-tone trousers or tights?
There is a lot of evidence to suggest that they were slightly fancy in the colour use and different legs. If I can just show you, Rat, if you're not too embarrassed about this, the legs are actually separate.
Yes.
Not joined,
Yes.
so it could.
Yes.
It's possible that one of these legs is from another pair, as it were, that had been damaged.
So they're hose rather than trousers.
That's
aren't
right.
they?
Yeah.
So you've got one vulnerable place, Rat. Despite the bad conditions underfoot, the geophysics team are working as quickly as they can to produce a survey of the area around the standing stone. On the mound, Phil's hoping to find some dateable evidence as he digs deeper around the stones.
How'd you fancy some carvings on the rocks? That'd be all right. Oak Springs Eternal.
Tony, I've just been looking through to see what other sites there are that might be the same sort of data around here to see how new this might be. And it's really exciting because I think you can see from this distribution map that this is all sites of the same date.
And these are all Stone Age? And these are all around the coast?
That's it, they're all around the coast.
And where are we?
And we're here, right inland. And there's nothing there at all. It's been recorded before. It's a lovely sheltered valley, as this part of the world goes. It has this it's secluded from the sea, but very accessible to it. And it is the only area on the island that in fact, on any of these islands, on Isla or Jura or Odyssey, that has any of this inland settlement at this earlier date, as far as we know. This seems to be quite profoundly altering our concept of the settlement on the island. If you look on the a few thousand years later in the Bronze Age, you've got a lot of evidence that people were living up here then.
They've all moved inland then, haven't
yes,
they? Yeah.
But we've pushed it back, perhaps, well, with the Mesolithic evidence, we've pushed back settlement up here more than 3,500 years.
Nick, just before you go, how have you got on then with the weekend? Good stuff, important stuff?
Absolutely, it's great. It's a very, very exciting site. I didn't for a minute think it was going to be so rich, especially in 3 days.
Yeah.
But it's really tremendous stuff, and it's given a real insight into, certainly to me anyway, into the council isle and the sort of things that might have been going on there. When you look at the island, it looks very barren and very bare, but now that we found this material, I can anyway actually imagine the house with the door open, harp playing, the light coming out. You can imagine, sort of smashing jugs and people coming out in the morning, sort of throwing the stuff into the loft, and in goes all the old bones and everything else. And that's exactly where we're finding it. It just lies there. Because it's underwater, it's not disturbed. There's no bacteria to break down things, so tremendous preservation. And it would be very exciting to see what comes out of the site in the future. It's tremendous.
We now have the first geophysics results from the area around the standing stone.
1, 2,
Good.
3.
Good grief.
Well, I think
What do you think they are? Anomalies
large
or
pits.
Brilliant. Pits rather than stones.
I think pits, possibly a couple of metres across.
That's absolutely stunning.
certainly,
I don't understand. What might it be?
Well, it could be a stone row. It could be a major religious landscape.
Do some more, quick! Oh, we're going to do some more. I mean, the point is they seem to be pointing towards the paps. That's the real point of interest.
Right, I don't think we're going to be able to finish this one today. No. This is big.
Big archaeology.
I better clean this loose up and then see if we can get them up here.
What's on the bottom of the trench then? What have you got down the bottom there?
Oh, there's more stones, big old stones, and
oh
mugger, what's that? Oh dear.
I think you definitely got to get
Oh,
David
what?
up here.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that looks like a bone right
does
enough.
look like bone.
Eh?
That does look like bone.
That does look very much like a bone. Well, you better go down to get David up here and get him up here pretty quick. What are you rating of that then?
Oh my God!
Yeah, no.
When they said it was something urgent, I thought,
Well done!
What we got then, Phil?
Brilliant.
Bone there, look. And it's articulated, look, you got the joint in here.
God, it's not long, Barrow, then.
I mean, I don't know whether it is human, but, well, there it is.
Brilliant.
Hang on a minute, let me get my famous dental book.
Whatever this one is,
I
radius of the ulnar.
Yeah, you see,
It's a hell
you've
of a
got
size.
this is the long bone in here. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But then we got the joint there. Now that's a hinge joint. So that's either got to be. I'm sure that's an ankle joint.
You reckon it's an ankle joint?
Well, I think it's not. I don't think it's a hand. I mean, look at the size of that. That's it's in good condition.
Well, a lot of the bone down the island is very soft, very mushy, but of course with all the limestone around here, that's presumably helped. Oh, all right.
It's
So is it human?
Could it be something like a piece of sort of an ox bone, the foreleg of an ox or something? That's what
I don't think it is human, but I mean it gives you some hint of what the hell is down here, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why might there be animal bones down here?
I don't know actually. I think is the honest answer. Have you any ideas, mate?
Well, I mean, we haven't really got enough here to see, have we? But it seems to me that the only reason, the obvious reasons are it's either debris from feasting and so on, which we've seen down at the island, or it's some sort of deliberately buried deposit for ritual reasons.
Well, this raises the question of what are we going to do now? Does it not?
Well, I think it does. I mean, my inclination is to think we can't get much further with this, given the weather
There's no way we're going to go on digging down
you know, we've, if you like, we've done the evaluation work. This is an incredibly important site. Incredibly implications.
You've done an amazing good job in such a short time, and I feel that there's no way we can just leave it like this. I think we're going to have
it needs a more delicate, longer time to work on it, doesn't it? To get the best result.
Isn't it always the way? Just when you find something really exciting, you run out of time. And apparently there's more to come. So this is the second printout?
Yes.
Have you found any more?
Well, 1, 2, 3 pits.
Yeah.
Do you want a few more?
Yeah.
Well, you tell me what you think of that.
Oh my goodness.
Good Lord.
That's... Is it in the same alignment as the rest of the geological strike?
No, it's not in the same alignment as the geological strike. I talked to Claire and we're a bit confused. It looks geological, but the alignment isn't right. So, you tell me.
So we're starting to get a massive landscape of stuff here. We've got all this activity with stones and pits and God knows what up there. We've got the cairn or whatever it is on the mound. And they're a distance apart. You've got this huge sort of landscape of massive ritual monuments all at the head of the lake here.
It's a seriously big religious site, if it's a religious site, isn't it?
It's a seriously big anomaly.
Yeah. Of course, a lot more work will need to be done before we can fully understand the prehistoric evidence on this site. But the Geophysics survey of the field does suggest that the standing stone may have been just part of a larger configuration of stones, possibly a stone circle like this. Or more likely, a stone avenue, which was aligned with the paps of Jura to the northeast, but also designed to provide an impressive approach to the mound itself. We started our investigation on the mound with the view that it may have been used by the Lords of the Isles. But what we've discovered this weekend is a ceremonial or ritualistic site belonging to a period thousands of years earlier. The Time Team view is that this was a stone-lined burial or storage chamber which would have looked like this. The bone is almost certainly cow or oxen and was probably placed here for ritualistic reasons. In addition, on the main island, the National Museums of Scotland have found this piece of prehistoric pottery. It comes from a pot that would have looked like this, and it was found alongside possible evidence of prehistoric roundhouses. So the big picture of this site during the New Stone Age might look like this, with people living on the island, but using the mound and the area to the northeast for religious activity. Our work this weekend has established that the area around Finlagan Loch has been important to people from as early as 6000 BC right through to the occupation of the islands by the Lords of the Isles in the 13th century. So with all this new important information, David should have a strong argument for raising more funding and continuing the work here. In fact, it's so important that who knows, the time team may even be back, weather permitting. Underneath all this rubbish are remnants of what life was like here in Oxford 200,000 years ago. Over there, archaeologists have discovered evidence of huge tusked mammoths and giant elephants. Can we find out more about these animals? Have we got the resources to recreate the environment in which they lived? And is it possible that we can find clues as to whether our early ancestors, prehistoric man, lived here too, side by side with the mammoths?
What do you think of that then, Carenza?
Oh, wow.
There's some hole in it.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
We ought to go out and
That,
see.
that over there, that's where the business is.
That's the site in the middle there,
That's
is it? Where all
over
the
by those
dirty brown
caravans. Yeah,
stuff
God,
still is.
I mean, this is, let's be honest, this is typical of about, I don't know how many percentages of Paleolithic sites in this country, simply because most of them, or a lot of the good ones, are in gravel pits.
Yeah, and they've got a way to take the top
I mean,
off, I suppose, haven't they?
you know, I mean, this is pretty typical.
Yeah.
Big holes, lots of water, and lots of rubbish.
Yeah.
Well, let's go down and see Tony first
Yeah.
and see what he's looking at down there.
Good job it's not raining. I hope it stays like this. We'll
need
drown
our-
if it rains.
We need our abseiling kit, don't we, down?
So what's this level here, Phil?
Well, this is the Oxford clay, Tony. It's about 150 million years old.
Wow.
But that's not really why we're here, you see. Within the Oxford clay, there's a channel been cut, and in there is our site. But what you've got to realise is that that whole channel has been sealed by this amount of gravel. We're going up the slope there was gravel that was laid down by the River Thames. Very, very cold climate at that stage. And so that's why we're standing in this enormous quarry.
We ought to go over and have a look at that.
Yeah.
Come on. It seems the water from a huge river carved a channel through the clay that lies at the bottom of this quarry about 200,000 years ago. A remarkable collection of mammoth and elephant bones have been recovered in this channel by archaeologist Kate Scott and geologist Christine Buckingham. But their excavations have failed to find the channel edges and the areas of prehistoric land beyond them. Intact land surfaces from this far back are extremely rare, but crucial if we're going to learn anything about prehistoric environments. Over the next 3 days, we're going to search for this land surface with techniques more normally used to detect man-made features. And for the first time ever, Geophys are going to try and use their instruments to distinguish clay banks from a gravel riverbed. How practical is it in the course of 3 days to use your kind of technology in order to create a picture of this area?
Well, I thought you were going to tell me. I
I
was hoping you would. Yeah, we're not used to working in sort of situation where we've lost 20 feet of topsoil and gravel and we're sort of below ground level. So it's an unusual challenge for us, to say the least.
But there's a river course to find, you know, an
so I
old abandoned
understand.
river,
Yeah.
which is only just under the gravel that we've got.
If the weather stays like this, we might be all right.
Yeah.
But if we get some rain,
If it
then
gets too wet,
it's
yeah,
going to confuse results.
And can we get that data onto computer?
Well, we think we can. I mean, we're waiting, you know, to set up the computers, and we think as soon as we get that data in, we can then actually do a 3D visualisation of the landscape and move around it and light it. And we think we can do it, yeah.
We're talking positive already, aren't we?
What about Victor? What can you do for us?
Absolutely amazing range of animals in there. You know, I've been practicing my mammoths last week.
You should have a field day
I'm
on
good
this
at mouth.
Well, it's 10:35 on day one. We've got quite a lot to do, I think, if we're going to be able to create this picture of this landscape 200,000 years ago. So let's get moving.
Right.
Prehistoric sites like these may look barren, but they contain a wealth of tiny environmental finds like seeds, insects and mollusks. Our air shelters will house all the technology needed to analyse these microscopic clues. We don't know much about the environment 200,000 years ago, so it'll be fantastic if we can gather enough information together to reconstruct the ancient landscape here. Even less is known about our ancestors at this time, but if we do find land here, then we can start looking for evidence of early man on our river bank. 11:30 and our first trench is cutting back beyond Kate's excavations. This is part of the river channel, but we may be lucky and find an edge. Kate's been prevented from excavating the site more extensively by the constant discovery of bones, and it seems our first attempt isn't any different. A large bone takes 3 days to excavate properly, and we can't afford to spend that much time on one find. But try telling Phil that.
Hang on, Phil's getting excited about something. What's going on, Phil?
That looks like a bit of tusk coming out, doesn't it? Maybe.
Is that tusk, is it?
Well, I think it is. Looks like.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to go any deeper there, then, do we?
We've uncovered a 200,000-year-old mammoth tusk, which could be as much as 9 foot in length. But coming from the river channel, it can't help us find land, and we can't afford to be distracted by it. What's needed are seeds from mature plants, land snails and beetles, and that's where our environmental archaeologists come in.
As we get down into this, we've got to be very careful because the environmental evidence is going to be very important.
Yes.
You know, we need to, you know, identify the areas where we might take samples from it.
Well, because we've got a view of the side of the section here, you can see this grey stuff. Look here. I'll just show you what I mean by this stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Hold on a minute. Where the sun's got at it, you'll see it's very pale. But when they get down to that stuff contains the animals and plants that actually lived in the bottom of the river.
Right.
So when you get down to that, let me know, because
Yeah.
then we can take bulk samples of that.
While we search the south end of our site for environmental clues to our land surface, Carenza and the survey team were with Christine using geology to find where the river flowed out of the north end.
I can show you one of the riverbeds.
So you've got a channel, is that line?
That's a margin where the river has cut a groove in the clay and redeposited all sorts of material. So it's either a quiet water part of the river or it's material that's slumped from the bank. If you can help me to map individual snapshots of this river, then together with the geology, eventually we can put together an idea of what we think was going on.
Perhaps you could show us, Christine, where this channel goes across here, which give everyone an idea of roughly what they're trying to do.
Know where to find it.
Can we get out of here? That's probably the easiest place to
Christine believes the river moved around a lot during the thousands of years it flowed through this site. But if Geophys can show up the difference between the gravels and the clay, we should be able to chart the various courses the river channel carved out. A clear picture of the river's course across our site will increase the possibility of finding surviving land surfaces. But back at Trench 1, we seem to have narrowed the odds already. Oh, you've got something.
Well, we've got a big tree here, about where Kate is. You've got wood there, haven't you? And it's certainly coming across to about here, look. Presumably, what's this, Kate, resting on the river bank, perhaps?
Yes, well, great big chunks of tree like this tend to be more on margins than somewhere out in the middle of a stream. So it's an indication, as we have had with hazelnuts and land snails and other things around here, that we may be near to a margin.
And what's so exciting? End of the morning, and it looks like we've found our riverbank, complete with fallen oak trees. But is this habitable land?
You tell me if I'm getting too excited or not, but I've got some flecks of charcoal down here. Do you get that anyway? See down here, look. I'm sure that looks like a bit there. And that's a bit there.
There are probably people better qualified than me on that, but I think what we found before, that it isn't charcoal, it's some kind of oxidization or something that's created this blackness.
Right. So it looks black, but it's not fire, in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I won't get excited.
It'd be pretty amazing on our first scrape.
It would, it would, especially on my first scrape.
So these are actually the beetles from the sediment that had the trunks of oak in it.
They are indeed. In this site, we've got species that come from Southeast Europe, from even Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Spain, but the bulk of the fauna is found in southern England at the present time.
Right.
And we can therefore conclude that the environment was warmer than now, because the species of beetle that are in here live south of this spot, south of this area. Let's see what else we can find. Come on.
Did you say something, Mick?
I've got another bone, I think, or whatever. I want Kate's instant recognition.
Looks like it is a bit of a mammoth tooth.
Our first mammoth tooth,
Isn't it?
At 6 inches, Mick's mammoth tooth is smaller than an elephant's and shows our Mammuthus primogenicus was consuming lush, soft vegetation. Mammoths only have 4 teeth at any one time. As one wears down, it's replaced by another. The ridges on our tooth show this mammoth had already worn out 3 of his teeth. This tooth came from a mature animal, probably 30 years old. Smaller than an Indian elephant, a male mammoth from our site would have stood about 10 foot tall. Its size shows it had adapted to a warm climate. So as well as being a good 2 foot shorter than a woolly mammoth, it may well have been bald as well. But it was still found in the river, and Mick feels it's diverting us from the main task this weekend, finding the land.
See, my inclination, Kate, would be to sink a trench across this to look for the old ground surface on, but I can see that you would risk going through a lot of stuff. But to pick up the relationship of the river to the ground alongside, and
yes,
if you like, accept that in 1 metre you're going to destroy
yes,
the odd bone, the odd tusk or whatever, but you're leaving...
That wouldn't be construed as being really bad archaeology, to plough through evidence of
I
all
think
these
it depends
animals.
what you're trying to do, and one of the things that we intended to do here was to try and get the environmental context sorted out.
And I think the information we would gain from a trench would far exceed the few things we might destroy.
Mick's proposing a huge gamble, destroying a wealth of finds we already know exist, in search of better environmental pointers below. A second trench at right angles to our first would cut back through the tusks and teeth on the edge of the river bank. But would we find the land surfaces beyond them? That's for tomorrow. Today, we're relying on Geophys.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite exciting.
Oh, really?
We do actually appear to be getting some positive results. We
Oh,
can't
really?
find
Brilliant.
anything magnetically, but with the resistance, we are getting changes. And, I mean, basically on the plot, the low is where we think the clay is, the Oxford clay. The black then are the high resistance. That's where we've got the gravel deposits on top of the clay, the Oxford clay there. You were hoping for a channel going in that direction,
That's
and
right.
we've got certainly anomalies going in that way. I mean, it's easier to see on the screen. That's where we were stood. There was the cut at that point, and there we've got a trend along there. So this time the clay in blue, the gravel in red, and well,
Right, so you're going to carry on that way?
well, we'll
are you?
extend our survey areas in between where the trenches are at the moment, and hopefully join up the dots.
Dots. That would be excellent.
We seemed to have learned so much about the site in the past 7 hours that I was beginning to wonder if we'd need 3 days here. But Mick decided I needed an overview to put today into perspective. The site starts to make some sense from up here, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can see what a sort of small patch we've got in the bottom of it, really.
Well, why are we so locked into geology this week? It seems as though archaeology hasn't got a look in.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable with something as early as this, really. You know, we're talking about 200,000 years ago. I mean, BC makes no difference, really, that length of time ago. And so at that time, you're dealing with hunter-gatherers. They're very dependent on what resources the landscape's got in it, whether it's animals, plants, all the rest of it, the stuff they collect, they hunt, they fish. So to some extent you need to know something about that general background before you can see where people might have fitted in.
Is there any realistic possibility of finding evidence of human settlement?
I think it's a very, very long shot. The trouble is, you've got a landscape, as I say, that's buried for a start. I mean, it's worse than looking for a needle in a haystack, isn't it? I mean, you've got everything you can see in front of you for many, many miles to the west of here. It's all gravel across to there. Now, there wouldn't have been many people living in that area. There might have been, say, one family operating over the whole of this area. So chances of finding their campsite in this area, you know, are pretty remote, really.
But somewhere in this landscape, between here and the horizon, there was a family hunting and operating.
Yeah.
We think it's part of a mammoth skull, and
back on the ground, we've uncovered a whole jumble of bones.
And then there's bone over there. So there's any amount of it. It's all over the place. It's getting really quite a complex little group of bone.
Yes.
You see around there?
Yeah.
And then we got something now coming in there. But be careful there, Tony. Yeah. You've got bone all the way around there. And then we got something else in.
Well,
you
that's
see coming.
the horn of a bison, inside of a bison's horn.
Right.
It's called a horn core.
Right.
Is that another one?
I can't really see yet till
No.
No,
and
I
then
don't
what
think it is.
we got coming through there then?
That looks like a bit of mammoth limb. That's probably also limb. I don't think that's. Yes.
Should we knock it on the head for today? It's getting a bit chilly, isn't it?
It is freezing.
Come and meet the Earthwatch people.
Right.
And have a glass of wine.
I just cleaned up my loose.
To help us excavate as much of the site as possible over the next 2 days, we've been joined by volunteers from the Earthwatch charity.
So that's what it used to look like. Well, it's what it could have looked like. This is a sort of impression. This is Victor's first impression of the channel with a couple of islands. This is sort of our best guess at the moment. And over the weekend, we can alter this impression as the data comes in.
You know, where all these bones seem to be accumulating on the edge of the river. And, you know, I mean, this is if there's any evidence of people living there, then it'll be on the riverbank. So we thought we ought to dig a couple of trenches back across the riverbank.
In order to do that, we're going to have to plough through mammoth tusks and
that's going to be the hard
bison
part,
heels and goodness knows what. Meanwhile, it's left to Christine as the geologist to peg out Mick's second trench, ready for the digger to do its worst, first thing in the morning. So tomorrow we're going to dig a big trench right through Kate's mammoth's tusks and bison's heels and all the other bones in order to see if we can establish what the environment's like further down. Let's hope it's a price worth paying. See you after the break. Start of day 2, and a complete change in the weather means a complete change in conditions at the site. 5 hours of solid rain have reverted the Oxford clay to the sticky mud that once lay at the bottom of the prehistoric ocean. While the Earthwatch volunteers shelter from the weather, we have to cope with the problems it's causing. Yesterday's excavation needs a cover. The rain could also affect the geophys results. We are making progress with Mick's trench, which is looking for the old land surface beyond our riverbank. But in all this mud, are we really going to find anything? It's actually hailing in my teeth. Well, the late 20th century interglacial appears to be over and we're diving back into another ice age. What are we going to do, Mick?
Well, we've got this trench that's been dug. Morning, Kate.
Good morning.
That's,
Just having a look. It's been a very interesting exercise actually digging this.
The digger drive was here at 8 o'clock, I gather, in this weather. It was snowing then. What have we got then?
Well, we thought over there with all those silts that we had very nearly the margin of the channel deposits.
Yeah.
By taking this through, we realised that we've got yet another cut in the channel here.
We thought we'd get the bank, didn't we, somewhere here?
Over there. But
Yeah.
in fact, we've got another cut which links up with one probably over there, maybe going in that
Right,
direction.
right.
John, have you got those shells?
So we've got a whole series of river channels, have we, through here?
Yeah, you see you get these shells which are coming out of this area here.
Yeah.
And in fact the margin of the channel is over there where it meets the oxidised clay,
Yeah,
that orange
yeah.
clay over there.
Can I have a look?
And
What have we got there
these
then?
are freshwater mollusks that only live in warm water.
So we're in a warm period with these
Yes.
then? Yeah.
So Mick's second trench hasn't revealed our land surface. We had thought that the edge of the trench here, where we found the wood and bones yesterday, was the start of the river's bank. But as we go back into where the land surface should be, the soil and silt that's covering the clay dips back into the orange gravel of the river channel. So what we actually have is merely an island between two of the river's channels. Back in the dry, Russell is explaining why we're unlikely to find an intact land surface at this end of the site.
Okay, now this is the situation when the channel was functional. Yep.
Right.
And in this, we've got all sorts of animals. On the sides of it, we've got all sorts of animals. Mammoths doing their vast droppings here, and the dung beetles falling in, and all sorts of things. Now, time goes by, you're getting the whole area is gradually cut down. This is what they call their cold gravels. And the land surface disappears too.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right, get rid of it. Get rid of all that, and in this you're getting rid of all the evidence of the mammoths, and you're getting rid of all the evidence of possible human beings. Now, somehow you've got to highlight this as the last bit of that surface which we started with. Because if this is the north end, that's a little bit that's surviving.
Right.
It's the last bit of the land surface that didn't get eroded away.
Can we do that?
Right.
Show that?
The rain stopped, sun's coming out. Just at the moment when we managed to get this temporary roof over the trench, the weather takes a turn for the better. But I hadn't realised that the rain is so problematic when you're digging because it makes the earth so much heavier. Normally you can just fill a bucket with this sort of shale stuff and chuck it on the spoil heap, but as soon as it starts raining, everything's about 5 times as heavy, and all of the soggy earth sticks to your shovel and sticks to everything that you're using to scrape the little fines with. It's murder. How are you getting on, Phil?
It's all happening here, Tony, it really is.
What you got?
I don't know if you remember last night, we had this bit here which we thought was part of a mammoth skull. And then we had here a bison horn. Well, we've cleared all the way around that, and we've now got bone which comes all the way around there. This is all bone, so I'm pretty sure that this is all part of this massive bison skull. And then we got something else, another piece of bone running in there. And then here, we appear to have part of a tusk, which has been sliced off when they machined out the gravel. So we've only got basically half of it. And here, what do you think of this here then?
That is massive.
Look at that.
Is that mammoth?
That's mammoth tusk, yeah. And you see what it's doing? It's running right in underneath all that lot of bone.
So how long do you think that it will take you to tidy all this up? Can we get it done by tomorrow night?
We can have a try, but we're not going to certainly risk ripping it out just for the sake of getting it finished. It's got to be done right if we're going to do it at all.
And yet yesterday we were blithely happy to cut through all the bones to get to the environmental stuff. I'm really split down the middle. Half of me thinks this is really interesting and that what we ought to be doing is protecting it. And the other half of me says that in 3 days, really what we ought to be doing is getting further down and getting some more environmental evidence.
Well, we have done that with the machine trenches. And so, with that, the idea of those trenches is so that we can get our environmental evidence. So really, we're getting 2 bites of the cherry.
It seems the Ice Age gravels have sliced off any old land surface at the south end of the site. But at the north end, where Russell believes we'll still find a land surface, Kate's team were keen to show us what they'd uncovered.
That's what, 200,000 years old, you
That's
said?
at least 200,000 years. It's probably not in situ. That is a piece of wood that's been deposited there.
Yeah.
But this area here, you can see from the tentacles of roots that are coming out and the little stumps, remnants of stumps that are sticking up, that this is a land surface undisturbed from 200,000 years ago or more.
Right.
It's incredible. These pieces of wood are the roots and stumps of trees which actually grew beside our river. We've found a tiny piece of the land surface.
What strikes me is it is so incredibly small. I mean, it's like a sixpence in the whole quarry that is surviving.
And this fits into with exactly what you were saying earlier about this is the edge of the riverbank that survived, and here it is.
And
that seems to me
that's right.
remarkable. I mean, quite incredible.
How do we feel about disturbing any of this then? I mean, it's all going to be buried eventually, isn't
We
it?
have recorded it, drawn it, photographed it and sampled it, so I'm ready now to take it down further to see whether there's any more roots underneath, basically.
It's an indication of how profitable it's going to be. Just look at the way the mollusks are washed out on the surface, just there. And you can the one that the rather bigger thing there is Corbicular fluminalis. That is exciting because its nearest locality at the moment is in.
Is it?
That's the one. Its nearest locality at the moment is in the Nile in Egypt. So it's beginning to tell you there's some exciting signal in here. Whatever exciting signal.
Let's get on with it, so we get cracking at it.
In the gravels that now fill the channel, Kate's found a number of stone tools, including flint hand axes. Because they've been found in the river, they were probably washed here, maybe from miles away. Still, that does mean man was in the area, and it gives one of the country's top stone tool experts a chance to do what he does best, flint knapping. So you've got this family of nomadic people, right? And they pick up a piece of flint like this, and then what do they do with it?
Well, I suspect they would probably go on for something a bit more manageable like that. And really they're just probably running around up on the chilterns, and they pick up a stone like that, and the first thing they do is what we would call alternate flaking, which is one flake off one side and one flake off the other side, and they just going around the edge like that. This is what it's really all about. We see already we've got something which is really very much a functional tool. I mean, you know, you can just knock these out whenever you want them.
Do different tribes of people make them in a different way?
No, I mean, you can find axes that were made in Africa. You could virtually put them alongside some that was made in Oxford. You couldn't tell the difference. You see, what just lately I've been using an antler.
How do you know that they would have?
And bone hammers have been found on sites of, you know, this sort of age. So, I mean, this is only one example of a soft hammer, which sometimes won't take the piece of flint away. And I really shouldn't be doing that. So, funnily enough, it's one of these really weird things. It's kind of nice because I can look at an implement, and maybe, I don't know, all those years ago, and you realise just how human they were, because they do exactly what I do. You see a bit of flint, you think, I want to get rid of that, and you know you shouldn't try to get rid of it because it'll probably bust the piece, but because you're human you think, I really got to give it a go. And they just went through exactly the same things, and you can look at a piece, you know, maybe 400,000 years after it was made, and you think, oh come on, you're trying to get that piece of flint off. There's no way they're going to get that piece of flint. They knew it, I know it, and it's just one of these amazing things. You can
see a bit of personality in the tool.
You can bridge a gap.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the great sort of comparisons that's been made was like calling it the original Swiss Army knife. Yeah, I mean, you name it, they probably used it for that particular purpose. Butchery, scraping, chopping, cutting. But you know, okay, that's a pretty rough hand axe. But the thing of it is, it works.
Well, that probably took about 4 minutes.
Well, there you go. I mean, you saw me make it.
Yeah.
We've been sat here.
Okay, we're just a bit confused about what we are actually tracing on the ground. I don't know, did you see these results yesterday? No. Basically, this is this gravel, the face along here. The thought was that that's going along this line. We've now done work at the other end, this end of the site, and so we're still getting trends following similar directions. So the real difficulty we've got, because we're looking at keyhole areas, when we're seeing changes between the gravels and the clays, we can't actually be confident that we've got an edge to a river bed. We may just be seeing undulations within that. So it's going to be very difficult for us to join up lines and say to you, there is one major river channel.
Why don't you geophys the middle?
There's no space.
That's the major problem.
No space?
It's all covered in trees, and we've got the tents here and everything. We can't get to the site, no access for it.
Can you pass me the con?
So that's our feeling. We need to do some more work, but...
Mick, Mick, can you hear me? It's Tony.
A sample may help if we're getting the same pattern.
Hello, Tony.
It's Mick over. Expected to find a river.
I'm talking to John in the tent, and he's a bit stuck really. He can't tell whether he's got one big river or lots of little bits unless he geophysics the middle of our area, which at the moment has got spoil heaps and trenches, not to mention a load of shrubs on it. Now it seems to us that really it ought to be a priority to do that work. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think we should clear.
Well, I've got Carenza over here as well, and we're both sort of nodding to each other, so I suppose we could take it as that.
Executive decision.
It's a sort of executive decision. I mean, I'm quite keen that we should get, you know, as complete a plan so that we can do the reconstructions on the screen of what the landscape was like, and this is all part of the landscape work. So that, yeah, I think we should go ahead with that.
OK, well, we'll try and get some people together, and maybe you could at your end and have a go at clearing a bit more of the site, OK?
OK, thanks, Tony. We'll come over and have a look when we've just looked at what we've got over at the north end of the site here.
While Mick and wood expert Rowena Gale set to work identifying our 200,000-year-old trees, we start clearing today's vegetation from the middle of the site. Back in the air shelter, Rowena is trying to match thin slices of the wood samples to slices from modern trees. I hope she succeeds.
Here, Tony, chuck that down a minute. Come and have a look at this. You were talking about how sharp a piece of flint is and how much it does it cutting. What do you think of that then?
Did you make that flint?
Yep, that's just one of the ones I saw when we were sat over there this afternoon.
It's amazing, isn't it? Kate, have you seen this before?
Ever seen anybody work with a piece of flint on meat before?
Well, I haven't, but one of the research students gave a set of flakes, hand axes and things to a local butcher who butchered a roe deer, and the thing he found the best for doing the whole deer without making any mess at all was one flint flake.
I believe that.
With the whole carcass.
Yeah. So, what are you waiting for? I mean, I thought you were making a fire so we could cook this stuff up.
Well, I'll stick this on the barbie.
First plate away.
Just about another 45 we need.
Oh, well.
Phil, just put it on a hay bale here. All right?
Tonight, we decided to eat prehistoric style, with just a few concessions to the 20th century, metal barbecues, plates, and of course veggie burgers for Mick.
I think it's a mammoth dropping.
A mammoth dropping, fine. That's wonderful.
But at least some of us were prepared to enter into the spirit of the occasion.
That's all right.
It's the cooks who do the job.
Right, what are we going to do tomorrow?
Carry on.
Where's Rowena?
The wood result.
Have you managed to get the data together yet?
Yes, the spread out rooty bit is almost certainly a willow. Outside chance it might be poplar, but it's more likely to be willow.
So we've got willows growing on the riverbank, growing into the...
Yes, seems so. And the long thin bit beside it is not from the same tree or bush. It's most probably elder, but I'd still like to have another look at that and make certain about that.
I mean, this is very interesting because he's showing us in detail what the local landscape was like next to the river, and that's presumably a climate that's not particularly hot or cold.
No,
it's
temperate.
rather
Yes,
temperate like
yes.
today.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yes.
So that gives us a picture of the immediate locality along this bed of the river.
And do you think there is a realistic possibility that by the end of tomorrow we'll have a picture of this whole environment?
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I think the amount of background information that's come out of this small area with what Kate's done before and what we've managed to gather is incredible. You know, we've got a whole battery of techniques, they're all producing useful stuff. I've no doubt about that at all.
So, it's the end of day 2. Let's hope we've got the big picture tomorrow. Stay with us. Nine o'clock day 3, and we've been given a helping hand by the owners of the quarry. Their giant earth mover is going to clear away all the spoil heaps that are preventing Geophys from surveying the centre of the site. There are some advantages to digging in a gravel pit after all. Clearing a whole new area on the site hasn't only helped the survey team, it's also allowed Mick a chance to dig an even deeper trench. This time, where our Geophys results predict we'll find the course of the river in the middle of our site.
Hang on, John. Oh yeah, look at that. It's
That's good condition.
that's good condition.
That could be quite a recoverable tusk.
So this is out of stuff that we've actually cut through just.
Last load. So that was the last load, which
It's going
which was
into the
from
clay,
I
so
wonder if
somewhere
it's
down the base.
Is that pink in there? Is that possibly? No, that's.
Dry fear.
No. Hang on. Well, that's the only pink bit I can see.
No, I think you'll find.
That's it, is it?
Have a look. It's very smashed, but it looks the right stuff.
Well, I think we're prepared to sacrifice a little bit,
right,
to gain the overall picture of the environment and so on. So we ought to carry on with this now, haven't we?
Right. Okay.
Well, what about this edge we've got here?
We saw it in the previous trench we did yesterday.
Yeah.
If I just move this material back a little bit, you can see that very, very approximately that line there divides clean clay from the gravel.
We don't really want to go any more into that, do we? Or do we want to empty that out?
Well, the idea is to take the whole thing down to the clay,
right,
and back, and then we'll see it in section.
You'll be able to pick it up and survey it.
Yes, but
from that.
if we can have somebody in with a scale rule and a grid, we'll just take a photograph of this.
Yeah.
So we have it recorded. Then we'll excavate it out and carry on.
Great.
So we can now start to plot the course of our river across the site, and we can populate its edges with the animals we've found, like the bison, which Victor's sketching here. The bones we've uncovered this weekend also give us clues as to climate and environment on our site. But by far the best information will come from the insects, molluscs and aquatic life hiding in the soil samples collected by our environmental team, who are now busily washing and sieving the earth from Trench 3.
You can put more water in that so you can wash those stones through.
Ah, there's one. Look at the little round one there.
Yeah, there's one just there, but there's another one up here. And these are both land snails. And that one down there, the round one's Trichiohispida. It's not very fussy, it lives anywhere.
So that's not much use to us, really.
Not much use.
What about that one? Is that a bit
Now
more
this
selective?
one's a Pupilla muscorum. It likes dry grassland, open areas. So it's not a dense woodland.
How would we know how far these might have washed? I mean, they're very small and light. I could imagine they could have come a long way.
They could wash a long way, but by looking at all the species, we can actually start
seeing if it fits in with the other evidence.
That's right. So if the species look cohesive and looks like we have a single assemblage from a single environment, and we can combine that with Russell's insect information and combine it with the wood identifications, then that's the way you can tell the big story. That's the way we can get the information, and therefore it's not just this one line of evidence, it's the combination of all the lines of evidence that is really important.
And that's what we're beginning to get now. It's really getting very exciting. By this afternoon we should have a really good picture, shouldn't we?
I hope so.
While Mike sieved today's samples, Russell and fishbone expert Brian Irving were examining yesterday's catch under the microscope.
Tony, come and look at this. We've got a story here. Now, Ryan, you explain what.
Well, I've been looking at the fish bones here, and we do have rather a large species list now. We have a lot of fish here which are still common in the British Isles, but we have three-spined stickleback, pike, perch, eel, bream, gudgeon, dace, chub, roach. So it's rather a long list.
What does that tell us about the kind of water that they would have been?
Well, all of the bones are from very, very small fish. So with these being so small, it's probably a very, very small water course. And then we've got the eel as well, and Russell made an interesting comment about the eel.
Well, the interesting thing about the eel is it spawns in the sea.
Yeah.
Now, the presence of eels here means, first of all, they could get to the sea, the adults, and it means that the youngsters coming back must have come back on the Gulf Stream. So the Gulf Stream must be washing our west coast at this time. And it's the Gulf Stream which is responsible for our warm climate.
It's lunchtime day 3, and we've got an absolute avalanche of information coming in here now. We've got Russell working on the beetles, we've got snails and seeds here. Karenza's doing the mapping. Here's the geophys going into the computer. Victor's working on the animals. Steve's creating a grid which shows us what the riverbank would have been like. And Stuart's plotting everything onto a big plan. And I'm beginning to get a picture of life here 200,000 years ago, that there would have been a big river meandering through here, and the whole landscape would have been a bit like the African savannah, although maybe the temperature would have been a bit more like southern France nowadays. And on the banks there'd have been oak and willow trees, but it wouldn't have been thickly forested, because if you think of the size of the animals that we've been picking up remains of, they would have been the sort of animals which would have bashed down the trees and knocked the trunks into this thick, caked, cracked mud on the riverbank that would have been crawling with frogs and beetles and little snails. It's good, isn't it? But what I don't yet understand is how our early ancestors, Stone Age people, fitted into this landscape. In the centre of our site, Mick's deep trench is complete.
Well, how you going on then, John? We've been hearing great things.
Yeah, it's been very good.
It's a hell of a length now, isn't it?
Yeah, it must be close on 65 metres now. It's a really, truly splendid trench.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anything out of it, that's
the exciting thing is this. It's an elephant tooth.
Oh, elephant. So does that help us with the environment, whether it's hot, cold, whatever?
Well, yes, elephant are only warm.
Right.
And this is
Right, so
really,
it's
really
warm
good
phase
stuff.
again,
Yes.
Looks in good condition as well. It's very solid.
Brilliant.
That's good.
Really good.
What about other stuff? Because I see there's a bucket down here with something in as we came across.
Yeah. Well, there's some.
It wasn't just somebody's lunch, you know.
Funny you should say that. Well, in the bucket, we saw some wood near the surface when we stripped it, and this is.
Yeah.
If you look at the curvature of that wood, it's a fairly large trunk we're dealing with.
Yeah. So we can get that looked at and see what sort of wood that is.
Identification.
Looks like oak, actually.
It's really well preserved.
The bands across it.
Yeah.
Haven't finished yet.
We haven't finished. Right,
there's even better.
Yeah.
So this is the river bank getting deeper.
Yeah.
And we then found these bones, which, although very dirty and smashed, they are. I've been told they're the one of the leg bones of a mammoth.
Good Lord, a big slab.
It's very heavy, isn't it? It's very solid.
That, joint, isn't it?
Yep.
You can see the bone structure in this, actually, can't you? It's, that's great, isn't it?
Kate?
Yeah.
What have you been doing while we've been at dinner then? We've been hearing great things.
I've been drawing.
You must have been getting pretty excited about all this.
There's a fantastic looking bone here.
But all this stuff coming out all over the place now. I mean, it's
what?
Look at this, look at this.
What's that then?
Have a look, we have to have a little pick of the end first.
You can tell by the wear surfaces on it.
This is a horse shin bone.
Right.
It's quite a short, stocky
Quite a
little brute
stocky
then.
sort of horse.
Yeah,
you
like
know, those sorts of ones.
Exmoor pony.
The environmental finds from this trench tell us even more.
What you can do is, in the channel, there are prostrate trees.
Yes.
We know that they are submerged trees because they've got beetles that need submerged trees. Right? Now, so that in a natural environment, trees would fall in the river, and instead of the water authority coming and cleaning them off, they would in fact be just washed downstream.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so there are trees which are in here. Now, we know from yesterday that we have willows along the edges.
Yes. Yeah.
The snails are telling you that the margins of the river are very weedy.
That's
so
right.
even though the watercourse itself might be quite narrow, you've got a nice, wide, marshy area.
There's a lot of, that's right, there's a lot of emergent vegetation.
Pondweed seeds, things like that. So you've got quite a lot. It's not a definite boundary this side of the river. You're talking wet, marshy
And you've
areas.
got pond, you've got
grading into meadow, and occasional open tree, I suppose. Nice greenery at the margins.
I would like some good ripples to distinguish the ripples from the pools.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are two clear-cut aquatic habitats. One is the pool of slowly flowing water,
Yes.
and this goes with the moles too, and some of it which is rippling and running fast.
Fast-flowing river.
Now, the only evidence that I've got are from the caddisflies, and the caddisflies say moving water on a mature stream.
Yeah.
Now, mature is usually a measure of velocity, not size. But in other words, it's not a trickling stream; it is a proper small river. Okay.
But has our final trench proved Geophys right? Have they found the edge of our channel?
How does this fit with all the stuff when we started, John, you were very
sceptical.
No, I'd have put it stronger though. You were
ready to go home.
You were, yeah, exactly. You were iffy about whether you were going to get anything out of it at all, weren't you?
Well, I wasn't that confident.
No,
but I think.
And now?
Well, now. Well.
Well,
I think.
We were told by Geophysics that the edge of the trench, the edge of the deeper part of the channel was here. And guess what we've got? The edge of the channel. Well done.
Well, I think the most exciting thing from our point of view is to be able to use the bits in between that we haven't dug from your survey and see where to dig.
So you've got whatever, a year or more to go, or a couple of seasons to go, and you can now see where perhaps you might want to dig.
Like we won't dig in any of the bald bits on your...
That's it. I mean, we can give you a plan by the end of today, certainly of the main area that's been stripped and covered now.
From our point of view, that's wonderful to have a...
I mean, it must be pretty encouraging for you, John, mustn't it, to actually be able to put geophysics in this sort of site?
Yes.
It must be another first, mustn't it?
It's different. It certainly is different. Not something we do every day of the week.
We've now got only a few hours left to record and preserve everything we've found this weekend. We won't have the time to lift our first find, the tusk, or search for man on our newly discovered land surface. But as Mick says, looking for our ancestors on a site this big, encompassing such a vast period in prehistory, is like looking for a needle in a haystack. I'm just beginning to get my head around the enormity of the time scale involved in this week's dig. If you think of this horizon as a massive continuum of time, then the remnants of the first man that's ever been found in Britain, Boxgrove Man, we can place round about where that grey hopper is over there. And then there were lots of ice ages and warmer periods and more ice ages until the period that we're looking at this week, the warm interglacial at Stanton Harcourt, is about where that white van is there. And that continued for about 50,000 years until where that yellow digger is. And then there was another ice age and a warm period and another ice age which ended around about where those trees are. That's the beginning of the Middle Stone Age, the Mesolithic, where you saw lots of hunter-gatherers appearing on the scene. And then the Bronze Age is round about where that triangular tower is, and the present day is where that big square tower is. And if you want to put your own life into the equation, well, each human life is about the width of my thumb. Sobering thought, isn't it? We may not have found man, but we have discovered more than enough to give us a clear picture of the environment here 200,000 years ago. Our Geophys survey has clearly given us the channels of our river. We've found at least one intact land surface, and Geophys has pointed Kate in the right direction of a second. She can now spend the time she's allowed to remain on this site excavating these former land surfaces. Our environmental evidence shows our river moved through flood to periods of drought in a climate as warm as southern Europe. There were willows in the river margins and a forest of oak and alder on its banks. Kate now knows the animals she's found, the bison, the horse, the mammoth and the straight-tusked elephant, lived as well as died here. And her excavations may yet reveal evidence of human life. Who knows?